本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。What's good, Internet? It's Tuesday, July 14th, and you're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 326. I think.
So close.
I'm your host.
So close.
I think I
just
nailed
want
it.
just be confident. Just be
Yeah,
confident.
you know what? You know what? You're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 326.
Nailed it.
There we go.
It's
That's like that.
It's 327.
See? Confidence.
Thanks, Robert Stack.
Into the world.
It's 326 now.
It is. I'm your host, Austin Walker.
It was Waypoint Radio, and it was 326.
326.
But actually, it was 327.
God. I'm your host, Austin Walker. He lives with the voices of Ricardo Contreras, Matt Gault, and Patrick Klepek. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thank you for having me. Always
You can tell it's a special episode because Gault is here to talk about a game that we've all
Gault
played.
is here.
Gault is here. That's the sequel to Who is John Gault. Gault is here.
Well, whenever
Unfortunately-
I see in our internal Slack, and Emmanuel Myrick does a lot of the editing of our pieces, and he'll just be reading Gault, and just every time he says it, it's just like,
Oh my God. Sorry.
You don't know
Matt.
the pain. Well, in the pain of having grown up in the South, where like anyone who's read any kind of book, that's one of the books that they've read, and so I've heard that just my entire life.
I'm sorry. Listen, I got. Here's what I got. I got Stone Cold Steve Austin Walker. I got a lot of Austin Powers. I got a lot of.
All of that is
there's
much
another
cooler,
one.
though.
Not when you're the kid. Oh, I got lots of. I got a lot of Stone Cold Steve Austin, Walker, Texas Ranger. That was like that whole long thing would be what I would get. Which I know those are like
fair.
heroic characters, but it doesn't feel good when you're like, no, I'm just me.
I didn't have anything.
point.
There was no riffs on my name, but I was always Doogie Howser MD because like that was really big at the time when I was a kid.
I
It
can
looked
see
just
it.
like
Yeah.
the
Neil
actor
Patrick
that I did.
Harris.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, we're here to talk about Ghost of Tsushima today because the three of us played that, but there's going to be a weird show structure. So, first half of the show, the four of us are going to talk about Ghost. Second half of the show, Rob got hands-on time with Assassin's
Is it
Creed.
hands-on time if it's in a cloud?
If it's in a cloud, he got cloud hands time, hand to cloud technology time with Assassin's
HTC?
Creed. HTC, that's what HTC stands for, hand to cloud. With Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Watch Dogs Legion, we pre-recorded that stuff last week because it was hands-on and because we were trying to sneak it in before Rob was going to be away a little bit this week. We are not going to do anything with this Ubisoft live show trailer thing. They're like E3
Boy, what a waste of my time
show.
that was. Last night,
well,
I told my wife you got to go to bed early and going to sit down and watch this Ubisoft thing, and I guess I could have just watched the
I
anything
honestly,
else.
for me, it's just like if you're interested in what that show looks like, you can go watch that. But I don't necessarily feel like we need to give up any more of our platform for stuff that we didn't even touch to talk about their trailers. Especially when I have no confidence in Ubisoft's leadership right now, the fact that they say that they're taking steps to address
Couldn't
the
record
sexual
like a
misconduct
30-second video on your goddamn webcam and just be
Yeah.
like, "Hey," they put out a
an
tweet.
excuse.
They put out a
Yes,
tweet
yes.
to explain why they're not addressing anything what's going on. When you could have just like Eve's like, no one's expecting you to sit here and then like lay everything out, all the HR changes,
The reason
but
they
to like
do that, to speculate, is because we know about that stuff.
Yeah, no,
because
of
we're
course,
paying
of course.
close attention because it's our space. But there are lots of people who would have tuned into that event and have no idea about the fact that 5 or 6 Ubisoft executives, along with other people throughout their chain, have resigned or been forced to resign or been fired or have chosen to resign in weird. Solidarity is the way I've seen it spoken about, because of sexual misconduct, bullying, harassment, and other issues throughout the company, the enabling of those things. And like, it's one thing for me to be like, Rob saw these games with hand or played these games. There's hands-on time. There was an agreement to do preview coverage. All right, we can keep that in the show. We talk about those games. I don't necessarily think that if you listen to that conversation, it's a particularly positive conversation. Spoilers for later, I guess. But I don't feel really great about being like, and also let's go beat by beat with their trailers, which are all just online anyway. So,
Yep.
so yeah, that's what I'll say about that. that conversation again, the hands-on stuff will be at the end of the podcast. So that'll be we'll see how long this goes. Hopefully not Last of Us too long. though shout outs to that double header spoiler cast. If you've skipped that, it seems like it's a really good conversation. So go enjoy that also.
Yeah, I guess I'll need to go listen to the other 2/3 that I wasn't a part of.
So fucking funny to me. It's so fucking funny to me.
Oh, I got a hard out at 3. Yeah,
Man, look, of the people who had hard outs, Maddie was the only one to come back. Shout outs to Maddie Myers.
Look, I'm committed to my work-life balance, Otto.
No, it's good. It's good.
Good. So what we are going to talk about in the first half of the show, without getting into any spoilers, actually, or very limited spoilers, I guess, is Ghost of Tsushima, a game I keep wanting to call Ghosts of Tsushima.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
But that's not it. It's Ghost, because it's like you become the ghost of Tsushima. That's kind of the thing, which is the latest game from Suckerpunch, the kind of the dev behind the infamous series and some other stuff. It is a game that takes place during the first Mongol invasion of Japan, in which you play a kind of mid-level samurai lord. On one hand, you're a samurai lord, which means you're at the top of the food chain. But you're also
doesn't seem like people afford you much respect. Like,
people leave you gifts at an altar after you do
No, but that's part of the hierarchy, the social hierarchy. I'm just saying, like,
other people,
the tone you get from other people is like,
your tier of people, you're at the bottom of the food chain of samurai, kind of.
Yeah.
You're not really an adult yet. You're kind of an adult. You're very much like just on the edges of high society in a weird way. And also you're provincial. You're at like this shit end of the map of the world, basically. So you're not like at the shogun's court. You are like a country, just a regular low-grade country samurai. And the Mongols come knocking.
With cop powers.
With lots of cop powers. I mean, this is one of the things we'll have to get into with this game. And the Mongols invade, and they beat the shit out of your dudes. And then you were like the only survivor. You're one of 2 survivors of that initial conflict. And it's you. Yeah, it's one of those. You, the ghost. You, and then your uncle, who is like hot shit samurai lord of the entire region, and he gets kidnapped.
Dr. Honor.
His name is Dr. Honor for sure. He is like the most, and we'll have to get into this too. He is the most like stereotypical. Well, what do samurai care about? They care about honor and dignity and
look them in the face.
Hierarchy. Look them in the face.
It is tropes the game, in a way. It
super is, yeah. And I think that's probably a good place to start talking about our experiences with it. Is just like, how did that stuff land for you? The fact that one of the first things out of the words of out of the mouth of one of these characters is just like, to be a samurai is to be honorable, to be courageous. There are long diatribes about how samurai don't rule with fear, don't
terror.
Fight.
Terror is not the weapon of a samurai.
Yeah,
but it is one of your skill trees.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And also, let's be clear, the samurai ruled with terror. Yeah. That is how they rule. They're the ones with swords. That's terror. It's a game filled with haiku. It's a game filled with, like, to some degree, it feels like there's a checklist of, like, what is there about feudal samurai culture.
Or it's like a word cloud. It's like samurai, and then like, we need one of these.
Hot springs.
A little bit of that.
Little haiku.
And we need a little bit of this.
We gotta
cut some bamboo.
Yeah, we gotta get
Japanese culture,
collectible straw hats.
It's Japanese culture as experienced by like dudes watching Kurosawa movies, right? That's what
epitomized by a Kurosawa mode.
By a Kurosawa mode that I think is kind of a disgrace and an insult to the artists on this game. This game is beautiful. This game is incredibly beautiful. I've played with the Kurosawa mode, which is a grayscale mode. And also a film grain. There's a little bit of film grain on it,
and it changes the audio track too. It like muffles it in a way, so it sounds like it's an old
But I don't think there are a lot of great accessibility changes in terms of stuff on the screen that needs to be in color for you to read it well. But 2, like,
how would that work? There are like specific quests that are like, follow the blue flowers.
No, nothing. At least as far as I saw. 2, that game is just gorgeous. That game is just the use of color the use of color is more Kurosawa-esque than that mode. Kurosawa made color films too, and he had, and also even inside of his black and white films has an incredible use of color. Right? We don't. It's not
black and white are still colors.
Yes, black and white are still colors. The understanding of contrast and the ways in which you shoot black and white is it's really hard, and he was
it's
very
specific.
good at it.
It's what makes like sort of some of the movement in like modern like film releases to just like put out a black and white version is like you can't just grayscale it. Like there is actual work that needs to be done. I feel like Fury Road did that work. Like different ones have actually gone and like you actually change the way the film is the details of it in order to reflect it.
Exactly. There's a billion things that you have to do to make that work. In any case, going back to the tropes thing that Matt had brought up. Like maybe that's how we start. How did that stuff hit y'all when you played this game of just like this grab bag of samurai catch-all words?
Well, it was interesting for me because I don't have like a ton of history other than pop culture references. So I'd still think this like in that often it feels that way still is that even for someone that doesn't have like a lengthy history or has spent a lot of time with like studying this part of Japanese culture or watching a whole ton of Kurosawa films other than like the handful that I saw like in college and things like that, it still sort of does feel like, here, like this is what you would expect from sort of a samurai tale. I mean, I think a bunch of the performances are like pretty strong and help string along even the sort of like tropey nature of it. And it's like interesting that like there's a lot of tropes that then also go along with a lot of tropes of open world games. This is something we're going to time travel right here. There'll be a point I make in the second half of this podcast in which the Assassin's Creed series seems to have recognized that it needs to change its formula and is trying to do that quietly without sort of like tipping the boat of all the fans that are playing. Whereas this game feels very much like it was developed as it was 5 or 6 years ago, and the open world part of it feels really old. So you kind of have both of the... Go ahead.
Even though there are kind of a few things that they attempt to make it more interesting.
Well, there's really smart to like the wind is both... They turned a piece of... In Ghost of Tsushima, they're... I'm gonna have to start catching myself. I don't even know if I was saying ghost or ghost now, but now you're gonna trip me up every time I say it.
Just call it Tsushima. Just call it Ghost.
Tsushima.
There's no mini map. Which is great.
There is no mini map. And I didn't mess with it, but they also halfway through a review period they patched in like a more limited UI as well that like strips down even.
It's really nice. It's nice to just get rid of all that shit.
It didn't
specifically.
It didn't turn off as. You go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, let me just finish this point, then you can pick that up. It's just that the the sort of like the waypointing that occurs in a lot of these games where you have giant maps and like how are you going to tell people to get around? You're going to put giant arrows on the ground and the air. How are you going to distinguish that? And in this game, it's literally the wind. Like the wind brustles through the trees and the grass and the bushes, and they're like all of it's working in concert. There are like big like painterly sort of like swishes that appear on the screen to like kind of bat you over the head of like that's where to go, but that only triggers when you set a waypoint or if you like kind of swipe on the touchpad of the controller. Otherwise, you can just sort of like look around you at this gorgeous environment and just kind of gently notice where the wind is going, and you can be on your way. It's just like they turn like a piece of UI into art, like in a way that's like it's a really beautiful touch that I wish was reflected in more parts of the game.
I was so skeptical of that system when they showed it off in a trailer a few months ago, and it seemed so like, all right, sure.
It seemed like a gimmick.
It seemed like a gimmick, and it is gimmicky. But it's one of many gimmicks. This is a game built with a lot of gimmicks towards a particular end, which I'm still not sure how I feel about what that end is. And that end is what we've already kind of hit on, which is the kind of Western fan of samurai culture, samurai pop culture's take on samurai pop culture. Like that is the end. Something a little more restrained, something a little quieter than most open world games. I find myself at a double end here, where on one hand, I'm, even as someone who went through a serious samurai phase, and I will talk to you about that in a bit probably.
You did multiple times in our private messages.
Private message. I was like, the haiku wasn't invented yet. What the fuck are they doing? Like, I get it. The katana wasn't invented yet, and they're like, it's the samurai. So, and there were other types of long swords but the katana was not. The katana was partially invented in response to the but the haiku was certainly not invented yet. And also, these haiku fucking suck. This is not how good haiku are written, which we'll talk about. I will go in on that. But so that's part of it. But the other half of me is in pursuit of this kind of stereotypical samurai vibe that they wanted to go for. They ended up at an open world RPG where like it's humorless. You could say humorless as an insult, but also what I really mean is quiet. There isn't someone cracking a joke every 30 seconds the way every other open world game feels. It doesn't feel like it's scared of dead air.
Just letting you wander.
Just letting you wander and be in that space. You know, it's not Breath of the Wild. I don't think that the world design is compelling in that way. But that part of it, I think, really ended up working for me almost in spite of the fact that what got them there was Japan, a place of natural beauty and wonder. Japan, the place of honor and dignity, and like that's what was on their kind of like whiteboard. It feels, but in pursuit of that, they made something that feels more like Assassin's Creed 1, which is a game I have a lot of weird fondness for, even though I know that in some ways it was kind of hostile to the player or empty, or people didn't love the repetitive nature of it. This is less repetitive than that is, and it also has a way better combat, so that helps it in a real way. But it felt pretty unique in that way. Matt, I'm curious for you how that stuff lands.
I also have. It's been a while, but I was really into like anime and samurai movies and Kurosawa a while ago, and so like watching it and playing this game was really like, oh, this is the Hidden Fortress mission.
Right. Yep.
Oh, this is that stock character, and like you feel like even in some of the cosmetics, of which there are quite a few, there's a lot of buried references to all of the influences that are on this game. But this game is so odd to me because there's so much I really love about it, and there's so much about it that just makes me tired, because it is in so many ways like as beautiful as it is, and as wonderful as the wind system is used to explore, and as tight as the combat system is. It's still, at the end of the day, I'm on a horse. I'm going between check marks.
Here's that question mark.
Hopefully
this one is worthwhile. Yep. Oops.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna capture all the bases so I can see all the maps, so I can get all the question marks, and then I'll go on to the next area.
Let me follow this golden bird. Bird, why do you just keep ramming into this house over?
So that is the other.
Again?
That's another.
I should set this up.
Please, you said it.
In the map, this game is very traditional for this type of open world game, in which the two main markers on this map are question marks for you to go to various landmarks that might be an upgrade for your character or a mission to find. And then there are like areas to save from the Mongol raiders. And those are your typical, here's a fort, go fight 25 enemies, and then you get a skill point that you can apply to your skill tree. And one of the way the game tries to like kind of throw you off hey, I'm going here, and the game wants to try and encourage you to, well, maybe like along the way go do something else, is there's these little golden birds, and if you follow them, they'll lead you to one of those question marks. And I think the game it seems like in design, it's probably supposed to lead you to like these like saunas that like increase your health, like these little things that you might not find a little off the beaten path. What I often found was that, well, I'd follow this golden bird and it just took me to the waypoint that I was going to anyway, which thanks. Or there was a sequence where, and Austin and I both ran into this, where the birds have trouble navigating the geometry of the world. Like
especially
often they are
towns.
just like,
especially
towns,
buildings.
Yeah, if they have to like go low and go through a bunch of houses, they're constantly just ramming into them. And they'll a lot of times work their way around it. But in this one specific instance, in this early town area where like you'll establish a forge that like lets you start building weapons and accessories, so you can do this big climactic fight at the end of the first act of the game. This bird just kept was literally like, it looked like it was trying to get under the house, and you can climb under houses in this game. And so I was like, cool, I guess I'll go down here. It's like, oh, here's like 6 supplies, one of the generic currencies in the game. I was like, okay, fuck you, bird. Like, I'm not sure that was worth it.
And it would put you from 30 yards away from the city, from every direction. That was the other thing. It's just like that one bird is patrolling that whole town to drag you in.
I figured out what that bird is trying to get you to. It's so stupid. It's in the blacksmith's house, in the rafters there's a bandana.
There's a bandana.
Great.
Yeah.
And if you get that bandana, then that bird will go away. I had the exact same experience.
So
where,
I
like,
also had those same birds land on temple grounds, like in front of it. And I didn't realize you can climb some of those buildings until the third act. And at the very top of these huge temple things, these kind of towers in the temples, would be a hat or a bandana. I was like, how'd they get up there? Who put that hat up there? No one else. My friend invented the grappling hook. No one else can climb to the top of buildings.
Well, it's actually a kind of a goofy part for a game that, as you mentioned, is otherwise like fairly grounded, and when it chooses to engage in like myth and lore, is actually it's actually when like the tone that they're going for works pretty well. Like, so there are these occasions where you'll hear a story about a really powerful bow or like a special sword technique that can quote unquote summon lightning, and you'll go off on those, and that's like when the game's like sort of reserved nature is pulled back a bit, and they'll allow sort of like the myth that is being told to like invade the environment to a certain degree, and is pretty cool. But it's a little strange that like for a game that otherwise is like keeping its cool on that stuff is also like, and also they don't have like perks or anything, right? It's just cosmetic.
Yeah, most of that stuff is just cosmetic. And I'll be honest, I liked playing dress up a lot in this game. This is very much one of those games where I changed my outfit depending on where I was in the story. Like, all right,
so you didn't care about so like the different suits like that you can wear have different perks,
okay,
but you were just doing it based on his
No, sorry, I just meant the masks and the armor, in fact, I think has one of the biggest mistakes you could make in a game like this, which is the first new armor you get, or one of the first two, the Traveler's Attire, so all of the armor has perks in this game. Those perks range, and they're kind of like story related. So one of the things that happens a lot in
the first
this
one you get, you will never wear again.
No, I'm the other way.
Wait, the one that like the controller rumbles?
Yes,
yeah, I wore that all the time.
Yeah, so I'm getting there. Let me get there. So you might get one that's like, this is good for ranged combat, and it means that you can slow down time longer when you're doing your zoom in, like concentration mode. It means you knock your arrows quicker. The first one that you get is called Traveler's Attire, and it expands the amount of map that gets revealed as you move around by 30 to 60, or no, it's by 2 to 3 times. It's 30%.
As you upgrade it.
Yeah, as the mode is
upgraded. And then at the top level, it also gives you 60 yards or 60 feet of area around you where if there's a collectible, your controller will rumble. And so whenever I was going from point A to point B, I would be in that armor. I would get somewhere and then switch into whatever my best combat armor was. Then after a fight, I would switch back into the Traveler's Attire armor. And really for the first half of the game, I didn't feel challenged enough to ever have to take off the Traveler's Attire. It was only when I started getting some of like the really cool armor towards the mid-late game, which really gives you really great offensive abilities or really good stealth abilities, that I started actually taking off the Traveler's Attire. And for me, the thing is, if you're going to give me in an open world game that's about finding stuff on a map and getting stuff cleared, and like that's the part of my brain that you're jacking into. If you're going to give me a piece of armor that says, oh yeah, and more of the map will be uncovered, I'm just going to wear it all the time. Maybe that's just who I am as like that type of player. Because Patrick, it sounds like you never wore it.
I don't want that goddamn controller to rumble all the time. I don't need these Mongol artifacts.
You're not getting the artifacts.
I'm good.
Dude, the only
there
thing
are
I have
80
left
banners.
to get, that's the only thing I have left to get. So this is like where I'm at with this.
You did the Mongol
game.
artifacts?
Dude, I have all the Mongol, because at the end of the game, by the end of the game, you can direct the wind. You can direct the wind to, dude, whatever. I had 2 beers. I put on a show.
No, I know. Well, we should also point out, you like said this game, like whatever its faults, like the sort of like checklist nature of it, like was scratching a very particular itch for you at this particular moment, which I think is true of a lot of open world games, right?
I think you have to understand, I was fiending for an open world game in this mode for 2 months, to where I mentioned this before. Like I played fucking Greedfall. It's like I need something to scratch this itch. I need to clear stuff off a map. My world is on fire. I need to like get order on my life right now.
Which I think is part of the appeal of these games, where like I can think that one of the appeal of like what Ubisoft is kind of doing with Assassin's Creed, other than like they have made some meaningful changes, especially over the course of this generation, but it is a little bit of like Assassin's Creed but X, right? Like now it's Vikings, now
this is by all intents and purposes the Assassin's Creed Samurai game that people have wanted, or ninja game.
Yeah, 100%. They've been asking for, and they've like teased an artwork over the years. I think they did didn't they do like a spin-off game?
They did like a 2D thing, maybe.
Yes,
they definitely did
I want
a
to say
China
that's
one.
true.
I don't remember if they did a Japan one, but probably.
But But I think there is a certain appeal to like, I like this type of game, but this is like the setting that really does it for me. And I think for all the faults I have with Ghost of Tsushima, I think there are going to be people who say, yeah, okay, yes, I agree. But also like this is my jam, like, and I'm okay just going around this world checklisting in this particular type of world.
Well, it's so weird for me. Go ahead, Matt.
There's nothing like egregiously wrong with this game. Like, no. I think it's easy to...
It's a pretty good, fine one of those.
Yeah, exactly. There's no... despite all of its weird flaws and the tropey nature of its story, and the fact that it kind of teases you with mystical elements at the beginning that it doesn't really pay off on, it's still fun and good to play, and the combat is pretty dang good most of the time.
Let's talk about the combat, and then I'll get into my long divergence. I think... I was really surprised by how much I liked fighting in this game. I've never liked the way a Suckerpunch game has felt. Like, I'm not an Infamous person. I like the world. I've always been like, oh, this world seems interesting. Let me pause really quick and actually say, one of the reasons I was so skeptical coming into this game was Infamous Second Son, which is a game I don't think is particularly good, and also
that was the launch one for PS4, right?
For PS4, and also is the one in which like multiple Native American characters are fucking voiced by white. Troy Baker gets to be a Native American dude.
Hey, he's just the man in the arena.
Oh yeah, he's just the man in the arena. You know what I mean? He's
but
just
which man?
Yeah, God, the one in fucking brown face. It's that shit sucks. And frankly, I was shocked to look at the credits of this and see majority Asian and Asian descended voice actors. Glad to see it
in the English language.
In the English language version, right. Yeah, absolutely. Also, did they fix that bug? Does anyone know?
I can't tell if this is a bug or not. So maybe this will have been patched. Maybe this will be addressed. Maybe I'm just wrong. But so
you weren't the only one to say this to me. So you weren't the only. Alex also.
Alex okay. Yeah, we had a chat about that. Yeah. I forgot about that. But so, this game made a big, it was made, or not made a big, but it's made a point to say, hey, like, we're going to upfront, do you want to have a Japanese language track? We put a lot of work into it, and it would make sense that even for English language players, maybe you would want that for a quote unquote more authentic experience, which is very much in the spirit of a game that goes out of its way to put in a Kurosawa mode, for better and worse. And so I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I guess that makes sense. Like, I'll just do that from the top. And I put it on and found myself like really put off from it because it didn't appear that the dialogue was matching the voice track, and so it's like the animation on the characters did not seem to be matching the voices, the audio that I was hearing. And my speculation was that maybe that's just the English animation, and it's just putting a Japanese language track over that, which would be like pretty disappointing. I then reached out to some folks I know that work in voice act, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's basically just how it goes." It struck me as a little strange that it didn't go the extra mile for something that would seem like pretty. If you're putting it in a Kurosawa mode, it seems like you would also want the
something that they've been like touting and very proud of and talking up constantly in interviews and social media, right? This is something they've said is a selling point of the game.
But this is in line with me with the way they treated a lot of the Japanese stuff. And here, let me just go into this since we're here now. So much of their treatment of these topics is superficial in the way that it feels a lot of young. I'm really just projecting here in the way that when I was young, I thought I understood Japanese culture and samurai history and shit like that. I was this person, right? Like, I was the person who was like reading the Hagakure and the Book of Five Rings and the Eiji Yoshikawa Musashi novelization, and was playing tabletop role-playing games about samurai and learning about how taking Japanese literature courses, taking Japanese history courses, taking Japanese, right?
Hell yeah. We are going to a very specific part of Austin history.
This is like 4 years of my life. Like, seriously, was like getting into Zen Buddhism, was like very much like figuring out this part of wow, this time in history is really interesting. The
planning your first trip to Japan.
Totally. And I never went, right? But I never had money to go. But yes, very much planning my first trip to Japan. The person who would correct you on when you thought samurai existed. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. The difference between the Heian period and, you know what I mean? Like, this is, I was the weird super fan in that way. And it's kind of a gross fandom. But I also, for me, I very much, this is kind of defensive in a sense, but I do align it with the same part of the same reason why I grew up loving anime and why I wrote a piece about Dragon Ball Z years ago and kind of black fandom around Dragon Ball Z and around anime in general, this feeling of like, hey, this isn't from here. This isn't white culture. It ain't black culture necessarily. It wasn't made by black folks. I mean, increasingly anime does have black people in studios, and there is black anime, and that fucking rules. But at the time, it was just like, yo, this doesn't feel like everything around me that is enveloping me and I mean, not to say anime didn't have racism in it. Mr. Popo is still a problem. But it still had that sense of like, this is from a different space. And I do think as like a 19-year-old, part of my love of samurai culture in Japan was I want to have the joy of learning about a history, but one that does not include my particular oppression in it.
Right.
In fact, it still had lots of particular and racist oppression in it. The rise of what becomes the Empire of Japan, of course, includes the oppression of marginalized people, including natives on the Japanese islands. Like the suppression of indigenous people on Japan is a very important part of that place's history. You can't sleep on that. But what it means is I come into this game with both a deeper understanding of a lot of the things that show up that produces a lot of friction against the way they're shown. And at the same time, I can look at this game like a mirror and feel like that's me at 18, that's me at 19, being like, the haiku, a more superb form of poetry in form and meaning. But then I'm also the person who's like, and these haiku fucking suck. So for instance, the haiku, also the fact that the haiku exists basically as a collectible. All of this stuff exists, and it's cool that it exists in a sense, but it's all reduced down in this game to being one of 17, right? Oh, I found one of the 18.
It can't just exist to complement the world. It has to exist.
It has to give you a health bonus or a resolve bonus.
What the player is doing. There must be like an active...
It has to be part of the power fantasy, right?
Right. It's like, it feels like someone said, cool, we want to include haiku. And then someone said, just justify its inclusion.
The myths are even like this.
Explain how the haiku works.
All right,
very quickly.
So the haiku are there's places you can travel to. Also, there's a funny story here for me. There are these little like pads that you can sit on out in these beautiful places in nature where the camera will cut to a kind of a preset camera spot when you sit down at one, and it'll give you a prompt. A prompt will appear on screen, and the prompt will be like, reflect on honor, reflect on loss, reflect on death. And then you'll get a series of 3 different shots of this area that are all beautifully composed. Again, this kind of restrained, quiet beauty of wild Japan, of feudal Japan, ancient Japan. It's not ancient, it's feudal. And around those kind of landscapes, there'll be 3 different interaction points, and each one will offer one line for your haiku. And you can pick one of those, and then you get another shot, and on that next shot, there is another set of 3 potential lines. And so you're doing your, like, here's 575, one line is 5 syllables, the next one is 7 syllables, the third one is 5 syllables. Haiku don't actually use syllables, they use a different thing. But anyway. And when you finish the poem, your character reads the poem, and then you get a little resolve boost. I think it's resolve, or is it? You get a bandana. You get a bandana. You're right. That one's just a bandana. The hot springs.
It's literally just a nope. It's like, and it's no perk. It's just, but also, hey, when you look it up in your inventory,
the haiku you wrote is there.
Attached to it. It is never repeated anywhere in the main world. But don't worry, if you go into your interface and dig on through, you can see that.
The haiku that you and at the highest level, I think this system is neat. I think the idea of like sit in nature, reflect on this thing, write a poem about it is a thing I would love to see in more video games. And I like this style of kind of meaningless choice making because it's not really meaningless. It's just player expressive. I like expressivity, and I like the ability to get people to think, hey, what are some thoughts on death? One, I think these haiku don't fit the mold of what haiku are supposed to do. Haiku should be about this is, again, very particular to my expertise, my fake expertise. Haiku of this era, modern haiku are different. Haiku of this era are snapshots. They're literally they're like lyrical. Also, haiku of this era didn't exist. At the time, renga was the high form of poetry. But when haiku exists in Japanese feudal culture, they exist as snapshots. You frame a moment in time. There's a turn in the poem. And the turn, and also some like kind of coded language around certain terms reflecting certain things, gives you a feeling about a certain thing. So yes, you could read a haiku about loss, but that haiku about loss should be just a kind of a snapshot of a sequence in nature, or someone walking somewhere, or a thing that just happens. These poems are filled with like, the samurai felt strength in their hearts, or I must be courageous.
It's not as though
it's not
like there's a big character turn or a big like personal moment for the player, and then hey, one of the ways you're going to reflect on this is to sit down and like think to go think through it and like write something about that experience. It is just like look at that.
It's Mad
Look
Libs.
at that beautiful ocean.
It's Mad Libs, and it's bad Mad Libs, because they didn't even get someone who I don't know what the process was for writing these, but as someone who knows a good haiku when I hear one, I think there was maybe one or two in this set of 20. It just doesn't produce them right. And on top of that, the haiku didn't exist yet. The popular form of poem at the time was a collaborative poem from which the haiku descends. The 575 thing was a thing where like you would do 575, then another poet would show up and build. It was like an exquisite corpse, basically, but 900 years before the surrealists invented exquisite corpse. And that would have actually been so dope to include in this game if you went to these places and you read the first two stanzas of a poem that was already there and you picked it up, and then the players get to leave going, wow, I learned something new about this period of Japanese culture. But that's not what the game is here for. The game knows you took high school English, and in high school English you learned about the haiku, and that means that's the touchstone it's going to use. And so throughout this entire game, that's the treatment that this culture gets. It is like...
Well, also, I saw like there was an excerpt from an interview in which someone asked about the actual geometry of Tsushima, and like, did you look at all... I forget the question, but it was along the lines like, how did you model this out? Like, how accurate to history is it? And they said, well, it's sort of just like kind of our favorite parts and also some of the surrounding island. And like, it was just like, it was like, I don't know. Like we called it Tsushima, and it's maybe got some touchstones from what we looked up, but that the idea that it was going, and you understand how you arrive at that
Epcot,
point.
Japan. It's like, hey, here's every biome on Japan on this little island, which is not the case for real Tsushima. And it makes me wonder, why not just invent a place? Why not do what Sekiro did and say, yes, this is the era of Japan it is. We're in a province that doesn't really exist. A different...
You can have haikus and just hand wave it away. You know what I mean?
Like, just say when... Yeah. And I know it sounds like I'm getting, on a high horse about the haiku shit, but I think it's emblematic of the way it treats all of this stuff in a very superficial, like, poster way. Like, yes, I love Japanese culture. Even though you're not actually serving that stuff well. And more importantly, it means you're not digging into some of the resonant themes you're almost touching on. This game almost touches on so much shit. Like, and there were times in the game where I'm like, does it understand that this is actually a really great critique of the samurai caste? And I don't know if it does. It's a very confused game about its hierarchies. It's a very confused game about the notion of revenge. Sometimes revenge is really bad and it will corrupt your soul. And other times it's a freeing experience that you should pursue at any cost. And sometimes being honorable is really the best road for all of us. And other times you really got to think about whether or not you're willing to use drones. Like, not literally, but that's like one of the underlying things that happens is very much the sort of discourse around, but drones can protect our people. And yeah, I don't know that it has unpacked a lot of what the subtexts are in this game.
Yeah, so much of while I was playing it, I was thinking like, wait, are we having a critique of just war theory right now? Is that what's going on?
Right.
And then like it just doesn't ever follow through on any of it at all. And that's like, I kept pushing myself through the game thinking like, okay, we're going to get these resolutions, and there's moments in Act 3 when you start finishing the side quests for your character, or for your companions, and I started to realize kind of like what they were going for and how things were going to be playing out, and I started to get really sad and disappointed.
Yeah,
not because those resolutions weren't necessarily interesting but just it was just very much like I just sat through another bad samurai movie.
There's a character that you meet early on. You guys can try and vaguely answer this for me. Who a part of their arc is that they're sort of like a reluctant participant in your effort to sort of like free Tsushima, and over and over, like throughout the course of the first act, like even as you accomplish certain things, like I still want to leave. Like fuck your people. Like I want nothing to do here. And my impulse is like, well, I think I know where this arc is going by the end of the game? Does it go where you think it would go?
I think it does.
Or
this is the character. This is like the first character you meet. The character who
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Totally.
it absolutely.
And it goes there in an artless way mostly.
Yes.
I think there's one moment that kind of sticks out, but beyond that, there is just it is like beat by beat. Earlier I said this game was humorless. I'll say it's also kind of passionless. It's not entirely true. I think the characters that they want you to believe that there is like charismatic or sexual tension between have none. But there is, let me tell you about my boy Ryozo. You meet a dude in the first act who is like the head of a bunch of Ronin, like a Ronin mercenary clan, basically. Which are kind of like masterless samurai, but also in that mix are very
the straw. That's how you get like the straw hat.
The straw hat. They're called the Straw Hat Mercenaries. And Ryozo was like your childhood best friend who wanted to become a samurai, wanted to make it, and things sometimes don't go the way you want. And there are some sequences with him throughout the game that are really strong, especially in the first and second act. There's some really good stuff in the first act with him in particular. That I was like, if this is where this game is gonna spend its time, fuck my uncle. Like, I'm way more interested in it because I feel like the dynamic between those two characters could serve all the themes that they're trying to do with the uncle that I find far less interesting. And, I haven't played past the first act, which is about, 10, 12 hours, but it sounds like it's not nearly as satisfying as I was hoping necessarily. The core tension between these characters is they're old best friends, and one of them one of them was born into the samurai caste, and one of them was not, but was from the same village, I think, and they were buds, and they're both competent warriors, they're both competent tacticians, and one of them is trying to take care of his people, and the other one is a samurai lord and is being taken care of by the people in a real way. And that tension is so good, and that tension feels like the game is the most honest about the kind of core ideas that are motivating the main character. The main character, this is the other thing about this game when I say, like, I'm actually probably colder on it, despite being a completionist with it, because thematically, I think this is a game that thinks noblesse oblige is real. That yes, the nobles 100%. Who are born into this world, who get access to better education and cooler swords, have a responsibility to take care of the lesser people.
He's very condescending repeatedly to all the time to the peasant class, constantly.
Even when they clearly know what the fuck they're talking about. There's a very early side quest that's a great illustration of this. It's very funny, in which he wanders into, and this is a tiny side quest, like there's no main characters involved in this, so I don't mind spoiling it. It's early act 1. He wanders into a farm, and some peasant women are like, "Oh, Lord Sakai, you must know our lord so and so, our samurai lord," and he's like, no, take me to. Is there another survivor from the fight? And they're like, yeah, come through, I guess. And you go and meet this dude, and he's very clearly a peasant who found samurai armor and the daisho, the katana, and the small sword. And he's clearly faking it. He's not really a samurai. And he's like, yes, I just need to go for a quick errand. I'll be right back, Jin, and bounces. And you track him down. And there's actually a funny comedy beat here that I won't spoil.
Oh, yes.
I won't spoil it. It's a very good beat. But then you come back and you're like, that was no samurai lord. And the peasants are like, yeah, dog, of course he was not a samurai lord. But he hung out with us. He's kind of a goofball. We kind of liked him. And he scared some bandits away sometimes. And that's like this great moment of Jin being very patronizing to these people, and not thinking, he's constantly thinking that the people who have not had his particular experiences must not understand how the world works, when the opposite is really true. But then the game doesn't ever really do anything with that.
No, because he doesn't change, and his attitude towards people doesn't change, and he keeps treating them the same way throughout the rest of the game.
Yes. And he's also simply inconsistent. Go ahead.
Well, to speak to that, the inconsistency is like the game sets up very early on this whole idea that, what Lord Sakai is going to have to do is, he's going to have to engage in non-samurai tactics in order to save his people. And, one of the early examples of that is like hiding behind a bush and stabbing a dude in the neck, like basically introducing assassination techniques into the game. And like, oh no, like, what your uncle says is that, you need to face a man and you need to tell him you're going to kill him before you kill him. And so it's like setting up early on, like this is going to be like thematically really important to the story, this main character. You would then think, oh, that's probably going to be a through line. Like at the moment you start this game, you open up the inventory and look through the menus, like there's lots of skill trees, there's lots of things you're going to be upgrading. And the initial thought is, oh, like maybe that's going to be part of this is, maybe there'll be some sort of, they'll structure like perk bonuses in a certain way where it's like, look, if you choose to go the noble route, which is, hey, when you're going to go invade a fort, you don't like slink around the side. You don't hide in the bushes. You engage in one of the game's like one of the cool ideas the game has is called standoff, which is that when you see a group of soldiers, you may not see them actually. The game will see them and it'll say standoff at the bottom and you'll hit up on the D-pad. Yeah. But basically what that does is like you walk up to them, like you assert yourself and you say, yeah, come at me, bro. And you like hold X and then release it at a certain time when like they're going to attack you, and it's a one-hit kill. And you can upgrade that so you can take out like I think Austin needs to like up to five enemies,
by the end game.
Which means you can take out nearly a whole squad during a cutscene sequence where you're not even engaging in like sort of like the main combat. But like that's interesting if like if you could go down that whole path that is like one, a thematic framing, and two is reflected in sort of like the player's actual play style. And then the other would be, oh, actually, like, fuck that. What's actually important is saving the people, saving our land, like finding a way through this, and then we'll worry about honor later instead of having everyone in shackles. And that maybe that would be reflected in the player character. And it just seems like it doesn't seem like from what both of you were saying, it doesn't really go there character-wise. No, and
you could play
this is also a game where, don't worry, it communicates very early. You are going to upgrade everything in this game, and don't you worry about it. Like, whatever you want, upgrade. We're selling upgrades all around here. Like, you don't have to pick. You can just have whatever you want.
You could play this entire game without going into stealth, except once on your own choice, except for when they make you do it. And all of the turns, all of the twists around being a dishonorable, excuse of a samurai would still hit. They would still make you walk that path, even if you walked into every Mongol base and was like, yo, come fight me. I'm doing this the right way. Square up, let's take this outside. Like, that would still, at certain key points of the game, your character would still be like, honor doesn't have a place in this moment. The Mongols don't deserve honor. And it's like, no, but I've been playing such that they do. No. Definitely not. And that's...
It's disappointing because the game leads you to believe that there are going to be those narrative changes and based on like what you do mechanically. But you by the end of, I'd say, about halfway through Act 2, you start to realize that, there's not.
There's not.
I'm just going to get pushed down. They're telling a specific story, and they're pushing me down that path, regardless of how I play.
And sometimes they're going to want me to be in honorable mode, where I'm going to do a duel one-on-one, and for some reason decide not to use my ninja weapons.
But those duels are great. I'm glad they don't like you use the
Me too, 100%.
Like, the duels in this game are...
Sometimes, so we didn't even talk about the fighting much at all, but the way the combat works in this game is that it is like kind of like Arkham City style, third person, hit a button to counter, hit a button to do regular attack, hit a button to do heavy attack. And then you have all these gadgets, basically, right? So you start off with...
give the game a little bit more credit. Like, it has...
You're right.
You are, over time... you are unlocking different stances.
You're right.
So let's say you have there are a lot of like basic enemy types, like a shield type, a sword type, a spear type,
a big guy,
armor,
big guy,
big armor guy,
classic video game.
Oh, the big boy,
with
like a
axes or mallets or whatever.
Yeah, and you can fight all of those in your standard like stance, like that you start the game with, and that is sort of effective against swords. But then over time, you're unlocking like one that's more effective against like a spear character, which means like if you hold triangle, you could wind up your foot and kick them in the face.
That kick
it's
rules.
Great.
It's huge knockback, and there's an upgrade for it that knocks them down. And if they're knocked down, you can run up and just hit square to instant kill them. So there's just this system rules. Like, this combat is one of the best versions of this combat that I felt in one of these open world
especially
games.
Relative to open world games.
And especially because there's no character lock on. You and I both had that same experience at the beginning of this game.
I hated it in the first hour. This game's bullshit. Time to turn it off.
You can't lock onto characters. Your character does a soft lock on, but the camera will not rotate. So sometimes you lock onto a character who's like in front behind the camera, you know what I mean? Like, your character is locked on facing the screen, and you're like, bro, please turn the camera around if there's a guy with an axe coming at me. But you get used to it eventually, and the flow between the different stances, the way the different stances are better at breaking through armor, because it does have an armor, it does have like a posture system like Sekiro or something. where you're trying to,
but only for the enemies. Like you can spam your weapons and it's not going to stop you. But there are like you're constantly like part of the reason to switch stances is because you'll be able to inflict stamina damage that when you're dealing with like 7 enemies at once, it's like, hey, you're going to want to like
burn
stop
through these guys. Yeah.
And it also slows down combat just a little bit while you're switching stances, which can help give you kind of a breather while you're
totally. And it feels good. It feels dope to be like, I'm in my shield stance, I deal with these 3 shield guys, and then a big guy's running at me, and I'm gonna switch over to my big guy stance and like
or just throw the smoke bomb and just stab everyone in the neck.
Or just Assassin's Creed style, throw your smoke bomb and hit chain assassinate, because that's in this game also. Or
do they have a chain one too?
Oh yeah, dude. Eventually you're just like smoke bomb, triangle, dead, 3 of those in a row.
See, because what happens before you have that is you'll throw the smoke bomb down and everyone's going, whoa. And then like one of the upgrade paths is you can upgrade your sword to make it more deadly. And then you can upgrade like your knives to make assassinations faster. Yeah. So what happens is like you'll throw these smoke bombs, and then just this really slow assassination sequence plays out where you're just like, hey, we could be stabbing this next a little bit faster, but you haven't upgraded it yet, so you can't. You have
to hamstring the guy first, then stab him in the head. If you upgrade the weapon, you can just stab him in the head.
You just stab him in the head. That literally is what happens. You just do the nail, and then that's it. You got him.
That's funny.
By the end of this game, your upgrades are just. This is one of my problems with the game's length. Actually, is the second act is great because it adds. There's this great combat system. We didn't even talk about like the ghost weapons, but like you said, there's smoke bombs and there's kunai, the kind of throwing knives, and there is a sticky bomb, which is really fun.
It's all about crowd control. Like it's just like various crowd control. Yeah. Like the game is constantly throwing mobs at you, and it's like, hey, there are 3 guys coming, throw a sticky bomb, and it's like, cool, I'll get to you in a second.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the first act, you end up like literally in the big final fight, there are new enemy types. And I was like, oh shit, cool. They're going to throw these in the mix because these are a little bit tougher to fight. And then Act 2 is all those enemies. They've replaced the enemies from Act 1 with a second tier of enemies that are really tough. Or at least tougher based on where your power level is. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the third act, and I think that they replaced them again, but you don't even feel, they have like full helmets on and stuff now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's much harder to headshot people with the bow and arrow.
But by the third act, you're a god. Like, you just, again, I was doing standoffs with killing 5 people at once. There's a whole other stance that we can't talk about yet. Yeah. That makes you very powerful and very good. And it kind of, it's one of the coolest things in the game. So I will explicitly not spoil it beyond saying there is a 5th stance. And that whole act is just like such a slog because you're so strong that there isn't a challenge left, including through the final fights of the game, which are completely drained of tension. And that act is like 6 hours too short or 6 hours too long. It's like either you needed to end that game very quickly and maybe have this area as a post-game cleanup zone, or give me another 6 hours of actual character development and actually keep digging into this stuff, because what's there felt like rushed. By the time you get to the very end, you're like, whoa, this is happening? Is this really happening? It didn't even warn me that this mission was going to be a long one. Like the end of Act 1 or Act 2 has a sequence where like, it's at the end of Act 2, it's like, all right, buckle up. Things are about to be playing.
You're going to be playing for 2 or 3 hours here, just so you know.
And then the final mission of the game is like, it sneaks up on you and then it's done. And that is just like, a lot of that comes down to the fact that their power curve ends up being broken, and you just get all of all of the good friction just completely drained from the game, if that makes sense. In any case, the combat is really good, and you'll hear me later in this episode when we're talking about Valhalla. It was really interesting to see the Valhalla stuff, because seeing that kind of cartoonish take on it really made me appreciate the smoothness and the like almost simplicity of the combat here. It knows the thing it wants to do, and it does that thing, and it does it really well.
And it's the interface is deceiving in that I think if you were to watch videos or screenshots of the interface specifically, it would give you the impression of not that there isn't depth to the combat, but a complexity that would seem overwhelming. But the way it's paced out to you, once you understand like what you're actually changing, it's really you're just doing the same thing and switching stances. And there's an iteration on the Arkham stuff that I appreciate, which is like I like that style of bouncing between things, but I like also that I'm given a little more freedom to switch between the stances. They just make even a normal set of like mobbed enemies like a little more interesting to fight for the, umpteenth time.
You know what it reminded me of is Bushido Blade?
Sure.
Kind of. And it's been a long time since I've played any kind of combat system that felt like that, but it feels, even though you have all these tools and you're dealing with all these different enemies, everything feels very deliberate. And you always felt in control. Yeah. And a lot of I think like the open world Mad Max and in some of the Arkham games and like Shadow War as well, that kind of bouncing a bit around, I always feel a little bit like I'm out of control. Like I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. But in Ghost, I always felt like I was in complete control of Jin Sakai. And there's these amazing moments when you'll go into a base, you'll do, you'll call everybody out, you'll cut 5 guys down, and then you'll one-hit kill all the other mobs that are coming after you. And you look around, and everybody's dead, and you're like, you feel like a badass.
Yeah.
Like you feel like you just completely wrecked the game in a good way, in a fun way.
Yeah,
and it was because you knew how to play.
That's exactly it. I think the part of the problem with that third act is it stopped feeling like it was because I knew how to play and started feeling like it was just because I was basically playing with the junior varsity team. You know what I mean? It was like, Jordan's going to dunk on your high school JV team, and you're the Michael Jordan of cutting necks by the end of that game.
Yeah, they give you...
including inventing personal problems.
Kato, I'd like you to mark down that as the title of the episode.
God. And it's, so that's like high level. That's kind of what it is. Like, I think it's a confused game thematically. I don't know that the writing is super good. It's frustrating how often either how superficial the Japanese culture stuff is or how much we didn't talk about like the myths. There are myths in this game where you kind of walk to a wandering song singer, like storyteller guy. And he'll be like, have you heard about Tadayori and how Tadayori saved people from the pirates with his godly armor? And it does this incredible, not incredible, this is like neat treatment of like Japanese brushwork becoming kind of a motion comic to explain this ancient myth. But the thing about ancient myths is like, they get to be ancient myths, but in this game, it's an ancient myth that ends with like, but then his armor was lost. And you could find it, perhaps, Lord Sakai, and wear it and save the people. And it's like, well, now it's...
At the end of that quest, they'll be like, actually, it's underneath. It's in the ground
right
there.
It's like, it's rocks.
Yeah, I know those guys are looking for it. I told them it was in the cave, but actually, if you just dig right here, you'll find it.
Here. It's like Legends of the Hidden Temple. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that really drains a lot of... When you realize you're talking to Olmec, it drains a lot of the kind of fantasy vibe from those stories. Though, again, the first one of those kicked ass. The first one I did was the sword strike one, and that has an incredible duel at the end. There's like an entire journey to where this duel takes place, and they change the environment in really cool ways associated with what the myth around this special sword technique is. And it's cinematic in the way that's not very Kurosawa, that's actually very Hollywood, that's very like big budget contemporary samurai film versus restrained good smart filmmaking, and it's still whipped ass. And I'm fine saying that, but know that that's what it is, right? This whole game has that thing, right? That this whole game has that feeling of how do we sneak in as many of the references to Japanese samurai culture that you'll know? How do we hit all of the power fantasies around being a badass ninja / samurai because you get to be both?
We're not going to restrain ourselves on a specific actual build. We're just going to let you do whatever you want.
There's the one place we're not going to be restrained. The power fantasy is turn into 11. And if you know that stuff going in, I think you'll have an all right time. But don't expect a great meditation on the samurai cast. Don't expect them to confront the fact that throughout the entire game you're basically fighting on behalf of a system that oppresses the people that you.
And occasionally the people that's the kind of the frustrating bit about the game, because both of you I think mentioned at various points where the game seems to tease that it's has a. Or is going to more thoroughly explore some of the ideas or criticisms that it might be playing with. And there are these moments where you feel the people pushing back on you, where they illustrate I can see how this is this I could see how this could pay off later, and man, Lord Sakai and his ilk they're gonna fucking get it.
But the end of it, he feels like, and again, this is not particular spoilers, but this is just again the sort of the kind of ideology of the camera, if that makes sense, is, well, there are some good peasants. There are some peasants who are above their station. Some peasants are better at just the world, and we should elevate those ones. We should bring those ones into our circle. We should trust them. We got to look out for the good ones. The rest of them can give me gifts and fuck off, and
Our
I'll defend
children,
them.
basically.
Or right, our children. That's exactly right. They're lower than me, and I have a responsibility to protect them. Even though also one of my favorite really small things in this game is there's lots of crafting in this game and like upgrading your stuff. And to do
lot
that,
of supplies.
Yeah, to do that, you're getting supplies, which is a kind of a fun genericized money system. There's no money in this game. There's supplies, which are little pouches, like little bindles of supplies. What is it?
Take those from the peasants. Take those from the lords.
Take them from the lords. But
even take the hey, those peasants. They may be hiding those supplies underneath the house for a reason, but those are yours.
Those are yours. So actually, that part, accurate representation of being a samurai, robbing from the peasants.
Wait, did the samurai crawl under houses, chasing golden birds, looking for supplies?
Listen, the samurais would absolutely send their tax collectors to be like, where are you hiding your shit? 100%. 100% open those floorboards up. I bet you have more tax money in there. Don't fucking lie to me.
The tax collector, aka the golden bird.
AKA the golden bird. That's what they call him when he comes. That's the golden bird coming to town. But the other half of that is you collect all your own crafting supplies, and so all your craft people will be like, just bring me the tree, the lumber I need to fix your bow up. Like, no, motherfucker, I'm a samurai. You're gonna go get that lumber for me. That's how that shit really worked. Samurai went out being like, I'm gonna get you the rocks for this.
They're occupied.
They're occupied. It's
fair.
Look, I'm three supplies short. You're gonna hustle me for this.
Hustle me for this? Really? I'll be right back. Let me run around this temple really quick. I bet there's some supplies I can find that I missed. Real things that have happened to me in this game. Oh yeah, there's one on this altar. I'm just gonna take the supplies from this altar. Not the gift altar. This is an altar to Buddha. Those are my supplies now.
See, it would have been like more thematically consistent, where like as you're sort of like liberating different or like retaking them from the Mongols, they're like, because it does have a system where it's like the gift. And so occasionally the game like sends you a message like, hey, make sure you go back to a hub area, and like there's these little areas where the people can give you gifts, but it's just like, here's a bunch of supplies and like a couple of rare crafting items. But it seems like a little strange the game doesn't engage with any sort of system, even if it would like feel shitty, but it would feel in line with like the shittiness like these characters of the system they're engaging with, where it's like, hey, when you rescue this town, you should just be getting supplies that you can then use to upgrade your shit. It wants you to explore.
Well,
it wants you to find those very obvious climbing spots and get up on there.
Again, it feels like it's from 2007.
It's really funny that this is the game that's like this and Last of Us 2 are the last. And Patrick, you and I had talked about this a little bit. These are the last two exclusive titles for the PlayStation 4, right? These are the end of the era games.
Yeah, and they represent like really important pillars of not just like on one hand, like Last of Us represents like a very like something that Sony has made part of like the DNA of like a lot of their games, and some of this is in Ghost of Tsushima as well. But like on what, you do like if you were to look at like the last 10 years, like it's like you have like this very specific type of open world game, and then you have these like very linear. Chasing, Hollywood cinematic storytelling, and these games to some degree represent not, I think Last of Us, for all its criticism, represents a height of chasing that specific style. Like whatever your problems you have with it, it is doing that to an audacious degree. And Ghost in some way is doing that as well. Although I think Ghost is really hindered by being a pretty formulaic, archaic, like a lot of things that don't work in this game don't work because they're dropped into an open world that has moved on past what Ghost had conceived when it was started developing.
You can feel that they played Breath of the Wild at a certain point. They're like, all right, how do we bring some of that into this? How do we get rid of the UI? How do we make this cleaner? Maybe that's not from watching Breath of the Wild or playing Breath of the Wild. Like I don't know that for sure. But I do think if you're releasing an open world game in 2020 and you haven't been influenced by Breath of the Wild, you're lying to yourself. But in some ways, part of the thing here is that like we've seen what that next step of the stuff is going to look like. It's probably going to look a little bit more like Breath of the Wild. It's going to be a little less icon chasey and a little bit more what's over there. This natural feeling of exploration. And this game touches on that here and there, and it feels good. But the way that those feelings contrast with the checklist open world game design. There's like a lot of tension between those two design elements. And in that way, I think it's in a more difficult place in some ways than doing something where you're just like, oh yeah, we're just going to keep pushing this thing forward. It's not at the cutting edge of it, even though it's the kind of last big hurrah from Sony in this subgenre. Yeah,
it feels dated somehow.
Yeah, well, part of it. I mean, seriously,
weirdly, as much as my criticism of Last of Us, I think Ghost of Tsushima might have actually been like a more pleasant experience put into something more like that mold that was about a more linear experience, pushing you along in like more confined spaces. I loved going, I inherited a friend's HDR enabled TV for this game, and I kind of thought HDR was some bullshit, and it's like, no, this game like wildly changed. I mean,
this is the thing, right?
It's like, hey, Katie, we gotta buy a 4K TV this fall. It turns out, it's gorgeous,
it's
and
so
like,
good.
I had so much. Like really, like there were moments where I just stopped and stared at the world. Like I don't do photo modes, but I'm so excited to see what people do with the photo mode in this because it is truly breathtaking at times.
The photo mode has a video mode also, which I'm very curious to see people like. You can animate stuff, I believe, in this photo.
Yeah,
mode.
you can kind of like isn't
tracking
it? So
shots.
The way it works is like. And also, like, you can set up a still shot, but allow, like, the grass and the trees to continue animating at, like, the spot that you stopped to kind of create almost like a GIF or something like that. So
one of the things I really liked about the visuals in this game, too, is I had just come from finished playing Last of Us 2 when I started this. And, Last of Us 2 looks great. It's got this very hyper-realistic, dark, gritty thing going on. And then you start playing this, and you see the power of, like, what you can do when you've got a directed art style.
Yeah.
And there's these bright primary colors.
Oh my God. The yellows in that first area, some of the first areas will bleed onto your clothing. It's so bright. There was a moment I was like, why is my sword gold? And the answer is like, it's not gold. You're in a golden forest and the light is being reflected onto your blade. And it's like, yo, that's incredible. Or I'm wearing all white and so the white takes on this golden hue. But if I change to a different color, the material doesn't react in the same, like that's incredible. And again, part of why I think the Kurosawa mode is kind of a diss to their own art team. It's not, I know it's not meant, I know it's a fun thing that they included, but then the marketing is playing up in a huge way.
Yeah.
But God, this game looks so sharp. Anyway, your point there, the directed art style compared to Last of Us.
Yeah, you don't need this hyper fidelity, and you don't need these amazing 4K images to create something that's truly beautiful, right? Like Ghost looks amazing, and it's because it knows every image, every time you're moving that camera around, it is supposed to have this like cinematic, every frame a painting kind of look to it. The grass is always moving. There's there's particle effects just constantly. In the air constantly.
It's kind of goofy.
Yeah, but like
my allergies were like, I get allergies in the spring, and I'm looking around this game like I could not exist as Tsushima. I would need a lot of pills.
Don't worry, that's not how Tsushima really is anyway.
It does have grim images, but it's really interesting the way they deploy them because you'll be in these wonderful, beautiful spaces of nature, and then just kind of punctuated. There's where the Mongols have been, and there's one tiny burned out spot where they've hanged somebody from a tree or set someone on fire. But it's always contrasted against the beauty of nature, right?
Which again is caught up in all of that stuff around. And this is one of the hardest things for me is I had a degree of discomfort with this game and it's playing in that space of stereotype and trope around Japanese samurai and Japanese culture and all of these kind of like watchwords around Japanese culture. But I also I had to unpack a little bit. Why am I feeling that here part of it is that Suckerpunch fucked up in infamous Second Son, and that means that I'm like super skeptical around their treatment of race because of the stuff with the voice actors. And the stuff in that game in general around Native American stuff did not feel genuine to me. Nor to the critics that are Native American whose work I'd read, like Dia. But why do I feel more discomfort from this than I did from Ubisoft, a French company, I mean a global company, but a French headquartered company, making a game about Egypt and North Africa in Assassin's Creed Origins, right? Egypt, a place that France has colonized and been part and invaded and killed people in and blah blah blah, right? And I'm trying to unpack why that is, and I think part of it is personal in the sense that I can see my own bad Orientalism of the past reflected in this game, and that makes it a harder pill to swallow, and that's less about what's in the text and more about me as an audience member. But also I just feel like we don't the same degree of Orientalization. I mean, it's weird because Orientalism is literally about the Middle East and Arabic culture. Like when you look at the history of Orientalist studies and you look at Said is not talking about the Far East. He's talking about the Near East and the Middle East. But nevertheless, I think in contemporary culture, especially in video game culture and nerd culture, Japanese culture is so exoticized, so fetishized. And this game is taking part in all of that. And it's doing it with these big binaries around honor and dishonor and courage and fear and fathers and sons. It's like it's 100% committed to big binary ideas. Like that is this game. Nature and the beauty of nature and the horrors of war are in conflict. And it's doing those parts of some of those things really well, but it still doesn't sit well with me. And I think part of it is that it says the thing it wants to talk about directly. Sekiro is also a game about honor and dishonor. Sekiro is also a game about the conflict between doing what you think is right and duty. It has like choices in that game around that stuff. And narratively, it is about that stuff. But also, it never quite just no one says don't be dishonorable. That would be dishonorable. It's way more. The characters just live that life and make decisions around that stuff. And it being disconnected from any particular place or moment in history means that I don't come to it with the same degree of like a focus or I don't have a magnifying glass on whether or not it sticks the landing on that stuff because it's kind of filed away in my mind as a parable. The Sekiro is a parable about honor and about duty, whereas Ghost of Tsushima wants to be a lecture on it, and it's a lecture from a lecturer who didn't prepare for the class, who didn't bring any notes, who was half remembering things from Wikipedia, and that's just a bad look.
Well, and From Software is a Japanese company,
right?
Suckerpunch is not, and the part of the marketing of this game has been, look how good we did the Japanese stuff, y'all.
Yes, you're right.
And so when those are valid criticisms, and it's going to make it, the discomfort totally makes sense because they're selling it partially on like, look how well we can tell this Japanese story.
Bro, the fucking Mongols have rocket launchers that were not like, the hwacha is a Korean weapon that existed, but not for 300 years. There were other types of Chinese rocket war, like, and I get it. Like, there were turret sequences in this game because they felt like we need turret sequences in this game. How do we get turret sequences in this game?
With what?
The hwacha, the big like rocket launcher
gotcha.
things, which are like, again, those didn't exist yet. It just don't do it. Just don't include shit that didn't exist for hundreds of years. It's not that hard. Anyway. I know that this is me being kind of a pedantic about it, but it is because of what Matt just said, which is they sold it in a real way on, yes, we want to leverage the history of Japan. We want to leverage the history of samurai. But at the same time, if you're not paying respect to that history, then what are you doing? You're not respecting it. You're just leveraging. You're not even leveraging it. You're leveraging what people think they know about it. Right? So... which again is fine if what you're doing is telling a mythical tale or telling a story set inspired by. But when you're saying this is based on the real, I mean, one of the things that happens in the credits is there is a dedication to those who died in the Battle of Tsushima, which is weird. Especially when the Battle of Tsushima is actually a different thing. The Battle of Tsushima is a Russo-Japanese war battle. It's not the first invasion of Tsushima by the Mongols, but I know what they mean. It's a game that wants it every possible way, and I don't necessarily know that it earns it. So, and yet I might platinum this game because that's how close I am to getting everything done at this point. The duality of man.
Yeah. That's extremely the story of this game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's not bad. It's super fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you on the internet, Matt?
I am at MJ Gault on Twitter. And I just
Gault, right?
Gault, not like the Randian objectivist hero. No, there's a U in there. And I just launched, if I can say this, I do have a podcast called War College that's been going on for about 5 years, and we just launched our Substack.
Oh, hell yeah.
Which is at warcollege.substack.com. So get a newsletter.
You like Substack? How's Substack doing for you?
I mean, literally, we just put out the first newsletter this morning.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
But I like as terms of like how the interface works and like all the backend stuff.
All right. I've been thinking about it.
Quite a bit.
I've been thinking about some Substack shit, so pay attention.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, I don't know if you've ever messed around with Medium. Maybe how Medium is very easy to use. It feels like that.
Cool. Well, check out War College. Thank you so much for coming through, and we look forward to the next time you can come hang.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to do some time travel. We're going to travel to last week when Kato, Patrick, and I talked to Rob about Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Watch Dogs Legion.
And I will, we won't get to it this episode because it's already jam-packed, but I've been playing Paper Mario and Deadly Premonition. So just mark that. We'll
get there
in
the end of the week. Yeah, okay, sounds good. All right, y'all. Well, we will be right back. And we are back, and we have a guest. It's not really a guest, it's Rob. Rob's here. But Rob wasn't
here before. I'm not going to be here on Monday. That's the material point is I don't want to be here, so I'm not going to.
And Patrick's going to sound materially different because he's recording in a completely different space with a completely different microphone. So we're going to be jumping realities in this podcast.
100. Yeah, this is all very. I was going to try to make it smooth and like, oh wow, Rob hopped on the call, but that's just not going to happen at this point. We may or may not have spoken about the Ubisoft event in the first half of this show. I don't know because we didn't record it yet, and we don't know how that show is going to go, and we'll fucking see. But Rob did get to play two of the games that we are 99.99% sure will show up at that Ubisoft show. Could you imagine if they didn't? Watch Dogs Legions? Just one Legion. Okay. And Assassin's Creed
Valhalla.
Vikings. Nope, Valhalla. I knew it was a V. I'm glad they didn't just call it Vikings. That's not a good name. They shouldn't let me name shit. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with AC or do you want to start with Watch Dogs?
Oh boy. AC might be the simpler discussion, so we can probably start there.
Okay.
So first of all, the event was like everything online only. They did it over the Parsec game streaming service. This is a little different. A lot of the other places that have done hands-on previews have been giving like timed Steam builds out, right? So like, you have to authenticate your access to that, and you get in, you play with it for a while, and then it's deleted from your account. Ubisoft, either for reasons of like higher security, I can imagine games of this scale, you're a little more paranoid.
Yeah. No, this is Parsec is what they use internally. The reason they were able to, like, Ubisoft games will probably largely come out on time is that prior to the pandemic, they had become like one of the biggest licensees or licensors of Parsec to start using it as like an internal corporate tool. And then they were planning to roll that out company wide in like the nearest future. And then COVID like suddenly made it like, shit, we have all these people that are going to be playing, like developing at home. How are we going to manage that? And so they just rolled out Parsec company wide. And like the biggest stumbling block was because lots of sort of like lower end, not design side, but like QA doesn't even have like the legal authority to bring home like machines that can play builds of games. So Parsec is like a way where like QA testers, for example, can play a game that is licensed to be in the building with certain hardware, and then they can play it at home without like violating the terms and conditions of like having a PS5 dev kit, which can't go in your apartment. So
that's very funny.
So that's how Parsec ends up here, is because it's like something they're using, and for what I've heard, has like been very successful to allow them to transition to remote work. And so I wasn't super shocked when it turns out that's how they were deciding to do these remote previews.
I could also see it being the case that like these games run on the rigs at Ubisoft, but like they clearly weren't fully optimized at this point. So like there were a lot of like weirdly long loading times, and I can only imagine the chaos of like releasing those builds out into the world on like Steam, and
getting
like,
18 emails like, is this broken? Is this supposed to do this? Is my build
for 20
busted?
minutes. You just have to hold on. Trust me, that level takes 20 minutes to load. It'll be great. So that's one part of the weirdness here. But two, so Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that game's creative director just resigned because of some of the scandals ongoing at Ubisoft and some issues with a relationship he'd allegedly been pursuing via like concealing the fact that he was married. So the other weird context around all this is the replacement for E3 event. Usually the Ubisoft event gives you long hands-on, and then you go talk to developers. I wonder if they ever would have let you talk to developers regardless, given what's going on. But this event was certainly not that. You only talked briefly to PR people, and it was all about like, hey, are you in your Parsec account right now? Try this link. Does that work?
Right.
So it was all very like technical focused. And there was like no real place to talk with people or do interviews. But like there's this massive elephant in the room, which is that there seems to be pervasive problems across Ubisoft's culture that affect a number of different studios. And so each of these games you're kind of looking at and trying to remember like, okay, so which group of scandals is associated with this one? But Valhalla like kind of is, there at the top of the credits.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird time and place for Ubisoft games to come out. And I think the thing I'll say is it's always felt to me, I always imagined Ubisoft as being this really impersonal, just games factory. And it was easy for me to imagine it just being like kind of boringly professionalized, right? Like they're just cranking these games out. And
it sounds
Ubisoft
like
games
sort of
were
analogous to if you like read interviews with like a director on a film versus a director on a TV episode, in which like a film director has like a lot of authorial control over what's happening, whereas like TV directors are assigned to like, hey, here's the script, shoot the damn thing, and just make sure it comes out on time.
Yeah, and I think Ubisoft games tend to be so like anodyne and toothless that like you can sort of forget that, hey, like what are the politics of the place where these things are made? And I think that served Ubisoft very well to sort of not like raise these questions, to sort of elide them in terms of the themes they make games about. And now
happy
that
to make games
pretense
about
is
the
shattered.
abuse of power. Happy to make games ostensibly about the abuses of power, or about manipulation, or about organizations that are so large that the vulnerable get harmed inside of them. But you gotta clean up after. You have to like make your spaces actually safe for the people who you employ. You have to. It is not a.
Yeah.
It is not a like to have, a nice to have.
No, but I think like for a long time you could say like, haha, it's just cute inside jokes that like Abstergo is clearly modified, modeled after Ubisoft itself. And now it's like, oh, but seriously, like what parts of it are? Like what is that place actually like? I suspect Ubisoft wants this to stop being the conversation around their games as soon as humanly possible, but that also means they want to stop addressing it as soon as possible too. So, we'll see how that story continues to evolve. But Assassin's Creed Valhalla does continue kind of the evolution. Here's the weird thing. Assassin's Creed, I feel like that and Far Cry became the template for all the other Ubisoft games. And the Assassin's Creed series, I feel, is quietly breaking from that template a little bit the most, and like sort of sidestepping its way to becoming something else, while every other game resembles AC a little bit more. To me, Valhalla
which is
felt-
funny because Austin and I are going to have I don't know where this is going to fall, but there'll be a
This will
conversation
be
in this
after our
podcast
Ghost. Yeah.
that is like very
It'll be after a
specifically-
Ghost conversation, which will be weird because I might sound brighter on Ghost now while talking about the Valhalla footage I'm looking at than when we're just talking about Ghost.
Well, but then also Ghost is a game that is explicitly sort of like chasing and built around this older AC
100%.
model that Rob is speaking to, where it's like there are parts of Ghost that like are really interesting and go in different directions while being stuck in this framework that AC itself eventually at some point was like, how do we wiggle out of this without anyone noticing?
Yeah, like the last two, I mean, Rob, what you're speaking to is that the last two big Assassin's Creed games, Origins and Odyssey, moved towards, increasingly towards an RPG format with lots of numbers, lots of equipment slots. Dialogue choices. When you hit enemies, the numbers show up and tell you how much damage that you do. Ability trees, skill trees, companions to some degree in Odyssey here and there, romance options. And I'm guessing, my understanding is that the Origins team, and Origins is a game I like much more than Odyssey, I think. The Origins team is the team making Valhalla, is my understanding.
Yeah.
Is your impression that does this game feel like it furthers the feature set that was in Odyssey, or does it dial it back down towards where Origins was, or is it
It's actually more of a mix. In terms of so this is the thing. I'm not even sure you can say, it's more the Origins team, because like it lifts so much of the interface straight from Odyssey. Like if you like scrub through the video I sent a little bit, you can see those little ultimate moves that you've got on the face buttons. Those are part and parcel of it. They weren't in Origins, but they're a big part of this one.
Yeah, in Origins you had like a finishing move or a super move you did per weapon or something. Whereas this is like it looks like left trigger or right trigger goes into a super move mode, and you then spend adrenaline points to do like, I'm going to throw a bunch of axes, or I'm going to...
That axe thing, I spammed that because, here's the thing. Parsec, my internet may have been failing this last week. Who can say?
Well, you can say, because you've constantly talked about it.
I guess I can. Yeah. We were having those freezing issues. So I didn't realize this at the time, and I kept wondering, like, why does this game have massive input lag? Why is the bitrate compressed all to hell? So I could sort of half see what I was doing.
Right.
And like by this point in the day, I was getting deeply motion sick because everything was super swimmy. So the only thing that I could reliably like use to like crowd control was this axe throwing ultimate where you're throwing a bunch of axes, and that would just let me clean up after those axes.
There are a lot of those moves, and they all look like, maybe I'm wrong here because I'm only seeing the ones that you're showing. They all give me the feeling of like Xbox era Mortal Kombat games. They're like very cartoonish. They're not gory in the way that like MK9 Forward fatalities or whatever are. We're not talking about bones breaking, or I mean sometimes you're seeing heads come off for sure, but it's a lot of just like canned animation, really outlandish huge swipes. There's a shield. The one that's the most like an MK animation is you just produce two giant mallets out of nowhere and then like head bonk someone with both of them to the sides and then drop them like you're an assassin who just finished dropping people with your Glocks, and you just drop them on the ground, except they're two big mallets. And I'm like, Nightwolf does that. That's just from a Mortal Kombat game, which I don't know how to feel about all of that stuff.
I still don't. Here's the thing. I think it's better than Odyssey because the combat feels better. Like, this is the thing I'll emphasize.
Even with the
Odyssey,
delay.
Even with the delay. So the delay might be causing me to overrate this because I kept getting spacing and timing wrong. And I was like, this feels like every other Assassin's Creed. I could eventually, like, some way, somehow, probably button mash my way through a little bit, and I'd be fine. The game wasn't that demanding. Here, it was like, oh, I'm screwing up the distancing on this fight because the last time I played it, I had my battle axe, but now I've got a flail, and the flail has a slightly longer reach, and so I'm letting this guy get inside me, and I shouldn't be. And that's like a level of like Assassin's Creed Origins. Like you had the spear, which was a long-reaching weapon, but like by and large, it didn't feel like it was a game of like super precise timings or like distance management. Valhalla feels like it's a little more concerned about those things. And that goes sort of hand in hand with it's picking up from Odyssey in that, yeah, you're an assassin, but you're also, what if you were maybe more of a war leader? What if you were like a pirate king, or in this case, a Viking raider? And so a big focus in this game is setting up these big battles or going on raids and getting in these like giant scrums alongside your crew and your allies. And in Odyssey, those fights didn't do much for me because they were very rote, right? It was like, here's a bunch of people fighting in a big melee. Here, they feel more like a Dynasty Warriors thing where it's like, so like there's all sorts of military action shit happening all around, and you are like taking part in a thing that feels like a battle. And because you're going to spend so much of your time doing this fighting, the fighting seems like it's gotten a little extra care and attention given to it that makes it a little more interesting to me than maybe Odyssey was.
Yeah, those conquest battles in Odyssey were one of the most disappointing things, partially because they never filtered up into meaning anything. It was the Athens versus Sparta stuff, and all of the 30 different zones in that game, huge zones, and each one could build up to a big fight between Athens and Sparta, and it never went anywhere. It changed who ostensibly held whatever region, but it didn't matter. And all of the sequences were just these kind of big open fights where there are enemies locked in, not just locked in animations. I think they were actually fighting, and if you'd done nothing, someone would have come out the victor. But where you're just kind of bouncing from fight to fight and interjecting yourself. That didn't ever feel very, maybe if I'd done more of them, maybe I'm wrong about this, but it never felt like objective based in a way that like, here is a space where there is a conflict, and first you have to breach point A, and then you have to capture points, B and C, so that you can use the siege engines to do da-da-da-da-da. Whereas the one piece of footage I saw that you sent of this siege, you were like, okay, we have the battering ram, we're trying to break down this wall, and then the enemy has these like fortified positions they're shooting down at us from, and while they're doing that, I also have to deal with the melee combatants, and that seemed a little bit more focused and like a little bit more like literally more designed.
Yeah, and I liked that castle siege a lot, less so the fact that it didn't have any checkpoints, and there was a sequence where like it was an infinite spawn, and I didn't know that, and so I should have just like, I kept dying there, and then it would kick me back like 15 minutes to the start of this fight. But this castle assault was cool as hell. You're sort of riding in on your long ships, in a lightning storm, storming ashore, breaching several walls with your Viking horde, and then getting in a big, dust up with this warlord you're trying to stop. And so the fighting there felt a lot better, but I also felt like consistently throughout this game, this feels like a game that wants to push you into those like, okay, now you gotta get in a big old Viking, tussle. And even in places where I was like, okay, I can sort of stealth my way through this. Like there's an early quest where you have to prove to the Saxons that you're one of the good Vikings. And you do that by saving a church.
I see.
The classic.
The Goofus Vikings, the Goofus clan would raid this church, but gallant Ivor is here to save this church. So you got to go do this, and I'm like, okay, I'll just sneak around and like clear this camp. That's what it's asking me to do. It's standard Assassin's Creed shit.
Yeah.
Yes, up to a point, but there's a lot of dudes hidden throughout that level that are like gonna come out of nowhere and like get you in a big fight, and that's fine. But then to finish clearing out the church, you just have to open the doors to the church, go inside, and there's like a boss there. And now you got to have like a big old like melee in the middle of this room. And
I mean,
so,
at a certain
this
point, is
feels
it
like a
keeping the stealth stuff just out of like legacy, as opposed to like, it seems like in some ways like this game and its setting and its characters and what it wants you to do specifically is sort of like, sure, like we still have that stuff, but
that's kind of how it feels.
Like, we're really not gonna like, cool, you can still press right button to assassinate like above a person, but we really want you just to jump down there and like fight 16 warriors at once.
Yeah, Ivor doesn't feel like someone who's gonna do the stealthy approach, right? Unlike Cassandra or Bayek. And
you're not picking a character this time, right? It's just a single authored character at the
Well,
top?
it's a bit like it's a Cassandra or Alexios type
Alexios,
thing, but
yeah.
like
okay.
Ivor can be a man or a woman.
I got you. Oh, okay,
and
okay.
Either Ivor is very much like a "Rah, let's go
Right.
kick ass and drink mead,"
Right.
and
Okay.
like so that's how you roll, and it never feels like Ivor is going to be like, "All right,
Time to hide in these bushes.
time to put this knife between my
Yeah,
teeth and like sneak into the castle like a ninja." Like Ivor consistently feels like they want to like kick the door in and be like, "Ivor's in the house. Who wants to die?"
Yeah. Which fair. Which
Yeah.
fair.
I'm
Also,
fine. I'm fine with that. And the fighting felt kind of good. In terms of tone, though, it does remind me of Origins in that where Odyssey was like super bright and like, you know, you're in Hellenic land.
Yeah. Over here we have the blossoming apple trees town, or not just town, but the state where everywhere you look is a big, beautiful blossoming tree. And over here it's fall. It's autumn over here, and it's autumn over here for 15 minutes straight if you just walk in a straight line. And here's the pirate town. Did you know there were ancient Greek pirates? Well, this town is dedicated to them.
Put on your headphones.
Did you know the Greeks painted their statues? That's why everything's day glow.
Yeah.
So the thing is, in this game, it feels a little bit more like Origins, and it's a little more restrained. The place you're in, East Anglia, in the Fens, it's super Witcher 3. Like in terms of just overall presentation and like even the music, it just feels like a slightly more downbeat Assassin's Creed, which I'm probably a little more here for. Like I liked that Bayek was kind of a sad dad
God, I
in
love
some
Bayek
ways.
so much. Yeah.
Yeah. And like Ivor isn't necessarily a sad character, but it seems like kind of a grim world.
You said that as on the footage you sent that I'm watching, you're getting into a drinking contest.
Okay.
So yeah, not a sad. This is like I mean, not that sad dads can't do drinking contests. I take it back. Maybe this is still that.
Well, I think in a minute, while I'm drunk, I have to go console my like drunk, depressed Viking buddy in that same clip. So like, just keep watching. But
Rob,
like,
you're
by
getting
the way, the
owned
lag.
at this thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, it's a timing thing.
Yeah.
I couldn't like the timing kept changing. And so I was like, why
This
is
dude
this working?
has downed 2 ram's horns worth of mead in the time it's taken you to take a
Yeah,
little
look,
sip.
I lose the drinking game, okay? Ivor's not a lush.
Ivor likes to taste. There's a little sip, like a little.
Yeah, see, Ivor keeps spitting it out.
Yeah.
But if you like watch a little further in this clip, also while you're hammered, the dude you're in the drinking contest with is like, hey, you want to go bone down? And like in the past, I'd have been like, okay, yeah, standard, like, you know, it's a party, it's Viking shit, it's thematic. But also, again, like you see that scene, and then you think about the Kotaku article where it's like Ubisoft underpays tons of employees and gets them wasted, and then says like, oh, don't mind what so and so did, they were drunk. And so you see this
It's
scene
different.
that, like, yeah, you get drunk, and then you're immediately propositioned by somebody, and you're like, yeah, let's have. Let's sneak off in a corner here and make out. Suddenly it's like, okay, that seems less neutral than it did before. It seemed less like it had a message. And maybe that's reading too much into it, but at the same time, like it is the reading that's like sort of jumps off the screen at this moment.
Also, his opening line is bad. I don't know if you remember this, Rob, but he walks over to, you're at a table where there's a feast, including a big roasted pig, and he says, the boar represents fertility. Did you know that? Bad line, Broder. Not a good one.
I was like, that boar looks like it represents some barbecue. Actually, I'm gonna take a little of that skin, put it in this dipping sauce, and yeah. The other thing, so in that quest, you can also see it's a wedding feast. And the guy in the thing you have to protect in this opening quest area of this demo we had is like there's kind of a soft boy king that you have to protect. He's a good Saxon king who thinks that Vikings and Saxons should live together in harmony.
Okay.
But he's kind of he's a soft little nerd. And this evil Viking is like, I'm going to kick this guy's ass because I can. And so you're all about trying to get this little Oswald fella back on his throne.
I see.
And yeah.
Well, is that the vibe? Like, what is this game, Rob? Are you the Viking? So tell me about Danelaw. Is this the era that we're talking about? Are we talking about the era which the Danes have already begun to take over some land in England and like basically establish their own communities? And so this is not just the Viking raids. This is a clash of cultures, to use a phrase that gets tossed around a lot. And who are you in this mix?
So you appear to be somebody who is a newcomer to this land. Looks like you have some sort of grudge you're pursuing in the background, but also you are kind of between worlds and are open to like helping the Saxons and helping the Vikings. I think by and large, like the vibe you get off Ivor is that they think the best solution is for these two cultures to get along and like cohabit in Britannia. But obviously the tension is that there's still new raids happening and people like sort of storming ashore and like taking land, slaughtering Saxons. There are some kingdoms I think that are already basically fallen to Vikings and like are being governed by Vikings and under the Danes. And then there are places where like the Vikings have actually been driven back or at least contained, and like long term there's some sort of there are unifications now happening between like Saxon clans and Viking clans. So that, and you as Ivor seem like you have a lot of you're a person who goes around and like sets things aright in these various zones. But in terms of like having the overall picture of like what's going on, I don't know. It's not like an Athens Sparta thing where it's like, okay, here's the conflict that sort of defines everything that's happening right now. The concerns of East Anglia and the section you play feel very like it's just local. It's like this is a local drama and you complete the story there and then you gather your crew and you move on to the next zone.
And where does this fit in like... So far, you have not described an Assassin's Creed game with Templars and...
Yeah,
like,
the word Templar hasn't been raised once.
Like at this point,
or
you could have
assassin.
just not called this game an Assassin's Creed game and just be like, it's just Valhalla.
I didn't hear shit about Templar.
Okay.
Well, the Templars are only founded in what, the 12th century, early 1100s. So when does this take place?
Like 800s, I think.
800. So we predate the Templars, but presumably
there's an
the
evil
pre-Templar,
faction.
the cult. There's a cult. The cult of Cosmos or whatever was in Odyssey is still around in some form, and that shit will work its way in.
Yeah, presumably. It mostly seems like that's the thing. This just
what a
feels like
franchise.
the
Oh,
Last
God.
Kingdom. It's like you're just a Viking, man. You're just a Viking. You're doing Viking shit.
A friend
And
of mine
like,
is
oh,
playing
no, you
through
died.
Odyssey. Yeah,
You
go ahead.
desynced.
Sorry. Yeah, you
No, I'm just
desynced.
saying
So it
that's
is still.
it.
It does say desynchronized. It does still say desynced, right? So that means that layer will still be there. A friend of mine who somehow didn't know about the futuristic or the modern day stuff is playing through AC Odyssey right now, and she's like, why do I have to get in this box to remember my ancestor? Am I controlling my ancestor?
On. There's no like, hey,
No,
by the
and
way,
I was
here's the conceit of this franchise that has been bloated to the point of hilarity.
Yeah, she
We
was
got
like,
tired of paying Nolan North and changed.
Yep. She was like, wait a second. Why is it that sometimes am I dreaming about my ancestor even when I'm not in the box? I'm like, well, the bleed effect. If you knew about Desmond Miles, this would all seem like it made way more sense. But unfortunately, we don't talk about Desmond Miles anymore. This fucking series. Oh, I will say, Rob, one of the weirdest things for me watching this is I'm coming right off of playing Ghost of Tsushima, and Tsushima is such a restrained game in comparison to where the AC series has gone. One of the earliest touchstones for me while I was playing that game was like Assassin's Creed 1.
Yeah.
I was playing that game and being like, oh wow, this is an old overall design in a lot of ways. And it's not just AC1. AC1 has a lot of very interesting, weird things that Ghost accepts the AC2 and forward model in a lot of ways to be like, okay, wait a second, we got to make this where people like to play this a little bit. But when I look at like the boss fights in Valhalla, which are these kind of big arena duels where both of you are throwing special abilities at each other and you're like doing big giant poses and everything is just, it's very Viking. It's very like, rah, compared to the Ghost stuff, where in Ghost, you end up in these duels that are similarly like, oh, people are watching on sometimes. You versus your opponent. You both maybe have some special combos to bust out or something.
But the whole game, literally the perspective of the game changes to reflect that the moment between these two characters is fundamentally different than when you're just fighting 7 soldiers. Even though you're using the exact same mechanics, like the controls you've used, like on a broader, like the camera perspective. Oh, go ahead.
They do get rid of, like, you can't use your ninja tools anymore.
Correct.
You can't switch, maybe you can still switch.
You can't throw a
stances.
smoke bomb to just assassinate someone with
just
one
instant kill
hit.
someone. I don't know why. At a certain point in that game, there's a point at which your character is, like, cool with doing that in all other circumstances. I don't know why he continues to honor the duel throughout that game, but
because it's cool, Austin.
It's cool.
It's cool as hell.
It's fucking cool as hell. When he does, like, that click. Yeah, totally. It's so, the thing that's so weird to me is I had a pretty rough time with Ghost, or I had a mixed time with Ghost. I played a lot of that game over a short period of time because it filled a need, and you would have already heard me talk about this in the first half of the show probably. But I left it feeling kind of down on it, and then watching this footage from AC, it made it clear to me why, even if I wound up leaving Ghost of Tsushima pretty mild, why I got through it, whereas I didn't get through Odyssey. I didn't even get all the way through Origin. Origin is a huge game that I loved, but that I liked a lot. And I like more in retrospect, having not having to play it anymore. I like it more.
The moment to moment in Ghost feels like seeing, like, I think you pointed out, there's in this footage that like Rob sent along, which is like a capture that Ubisoft did of his playthrough. Like there's a sequence where Rob is like slowly fighting like 3 of these husky dudes in a church, and I'm watching this combat, and like, I'm not playing it. I don't know what like sort of the feel of it is.
And it's
like,
on the streaming software.
And it's on the streaming software. So there's lots of caveats that are like really important. But nonetheless, you can glean a through line of how that combat is going to feel. And like I suddenly looked back at Ghost of Tsushima and was like, well, part of the reason that game works on the level that it does is that, like, often we understand that for a big open world, it means often like the mechanics and the systems of those mechanics, especially like combat, are just going to be poor. Like that's just not as much of an emphasis. So it's more like combat's there to like accomplish the goal of like defeating the enemies, as opposed to being like a main source of interest for the player. And Ghost like puts a much higher emphasis on its combat and making
the moment to moment fighting
and the moment to moment feeling good and like having satisfying interactions,
which is surprising. And you've already. I'm not going to repeat ourselves here because we already talked about this in the first half, and we have to be careful about it because of the way we're recording these episodes. But what I do keep coming back to is this feeling of Ghost being a much more restrained game than what Ubisoft wants the Assassin's Creed series to go to, which is ironic for me because what drew me to Assassin's Creed to begin with was its restraint. So much of AC1 is this quiet, contemplative journey through the Middle East, right? Even through AC2 and the Ezio games, where you get a kind of more bombastic character, those games have lots of quiet moments. There is a sense of especially compared to other action games, there was a sense in those games of not realism, but like video game action naturalism, where blades are clanking off of each other, and even when you get your most outrageous moves, you don't get to use them too often, and you're not like summoning flaming axes or doing any of the more wild shit. Again, the 2 giant mallets coming from nowhere, and then clonk, beating someone over the head with them in a Saturday morning cartoon way. This seems to work for them, but the thing that is actually hovering over me, and I know you didn't get to play this, but by the time we talk, again, the timeline on this is weird. My guess is we'll see Gods and Monsters on whenever this Ubisoft day is, which is like, seems like a pretty explicit, even more cartoonish version of what they've been doing with the Assassin's Creed franchise. And it makes me wonder if, like, long term, the goal is to just continue down this super heroics path.
Well, didn't Odyssey
what?
or Origins eventually go to like straight up fucking Atlantis, and you're fighting?
Yeah, Odyssey
like,
goes to
mythical
Atlantis.
creatures.
Yeah.
So, which if anything, again,
I mean, the myth stuff in Odyssey seemed kind of dope, if I'm being honest.
yeah, that's what I mean. They leaned into it in a way that seems like potentially neat, and actually is one of those things we've talked about. Probably talk about in Ghost, the conversation where this game could have benefited from leaning a little into that at times.
A little bit more of that, yeah. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. So, Rob, I'm curious if you feel like, is that tonal stuff, because you've already suggested there's kind of a weird blend here, because the area is much lower key than the Odyssey areas, but at the same time, the action is still dialed to 11. Do you think that the areas are going to change to meet that action, or if the action is just kind of plateau?
It's tough to say. Like, I'll say there's a big optional boss battle where, like, you fight a Valkyrie. Just she's in the world. And, like, so it sort of seems like the thing they might be doing is, like, okay, some crazy mythological shit can happen over here. But, like, in the main world, people are like, okay, it's Viking politics, Saxons, Danelaw, etc. And then you go out in the world, and it's like, ooh, what's this? Like, did Odin set foot here? Like shit like that. Yeah. So, like, I don't know, but I think you've touched on something really important, which is that this is a game that feels like it's less restrained and getting less restrained, and also that Ubisoft games have this sort of super heroics vibe. And I wish the upload had worked so you could see Legion. Because the problems you're describing with the concerns you have with Assassin's Creed as you watch this footage, tenfold when it comes to Legion.
Should we just pivot and start talking about Watch Dogs Legion then?
Yeah, okay. I think so.
So yeah, Rob, let's just talk about Watch Dogs Legion then.
All right,
Rob.
I was excited about this one. I was like, yeah, like Clint Hocking is back at Ubisoft, and like
Clint Hocking, the creative director of Far Cry 2, or the lead of, I don't know what the actual title was on Far Cry 2.
Who admittedly, I thought was wildly overrated at the time of Far Cry 2, but in his long absence from the industry, and
Jesus,
like I
Rob.
have since. Look, he gave a bad talk at MIT, and like I was like, "Oh,
we all got a bad
this guy's
talk
full
on
of
us.
shit."
I've given bad talks. It happens.
Also, we haven't seen this game since I played it at E3. Since it was shown at E3 last year, it was delayed significantly for non-COVID related reasons. And so, like, I was so fascinated for Rob to check this game out. Like, we had talked about prior to Rob playing this, like, will this game like reconsider like how it contextualizes interactions with the police, given the moment that it's about to come out in which it's a game where you can be anybody, and like also I guess that means you can be the cops.
Yeah, I guess like the premise that's worth just saying out loud is like it's near dystopian future. It's you're playing a group of rebels, and literally a group there. The promise was there was no single protagonist. You're recruiting characters from a pool of procedurally generated characters who have backgrounds and relationships, and that included police. That included that if you did some favors for the cops, for a cop, that cop would suddenly be down with like overthrowing the whole system that they were working to defend. And I know there's particular story things. Like I think that the situation in that game is that the police have been replaced with private security company, but those characters you can also recruit, is my understanding. It's like everybody in that game is recruitable, was the promise. And the proc gen XCOM storytelling, Austin loves all that shit and is very curious about how do you build a game where there's no protagonist in the AAA mold. How do you build a game that's supposed to be doing all this proc gen narrative stuff, not just proc gen character stuff? Does that work? Even though the politically minded leftist Austin is like, please don't make me the cop friend game. Please, come on. You got to recognize that material relationships and social relations shape things more broadly than if I help someone with their personal problems, they'll join my revolution.
Well, here's the solution.
Yes.
The cops are just gone.
Oh.
Didn't see a single cop.
Well,
what I saw were the private security guards
Okay.
beating the shit out of people on every street corner.
Can you recruit the private security guards?
No.
Oh, so did they just make a hard line on that then?
Yeah, like you get a bit of voiceover. It's like, boy, it'd be nice if we would recruit one of those guys, huh? Well. Just imagine what we could do.
So you did not see the police strike then? Because that was like an active thing in the demo that we played last year, where the old cops were all on, or not the strike.
You don't see a Bobby. There's not a Bobby.
Wow, they had they were maybe you're playing a different part of the world map. Who knows? That might all still be in there. But the zone that Patrick and I played last year, one of the like ongoing things was a police protest. Cops who were mad that they'd been replaced by private security. Anyway, this is all secondary to the larger point, which is like, does it work?
No. Okay. So, all right.
Break my heart, Rob.
All right. Where to begin? Okay. First of all, nothing feels very good. And admittedly, like maybe Parsec was not helping with that, but like literally, like with we're having the same conversation. Austin, Watch Dogs. Every time that game made you take your gun out, which was pretty frequently, it sucked. It was like the guns feel like garbage.
But did that change in Watch Dogs 2, which neither Rob nor I played, but Austin, I know you were
Watch Dogs 2 slaps.
Of,
like I think there's some serious problems with that. With some of the there's some stuff in that game that goes bad. But I think anyone listening to this who is interested in open world games should play Watch Dogs 2, which I think is free on PC or on PlayStation Plus or something. Based on, so I think maybe by the time this podcast is out, it won't be free anymore. But it's worth whatever. It's a good game. I like Watch Dogs 2 a lot.
Weirdly, people liked the characters in that game quite a bit.
That game has so many good
issues.
characters.
And so then the sequel to then just say, what if no characters, is just a fascinating pivot that I'm sure is, these games overlap. The development at Ubisoft is like, uniquely to them for the games they make. But I think it's just fascinating that like that's the hard pivot. Is like, look, we made like the first game made such a big deal. It was Aiden Pierce, right? Well, that was the main character.
So much.
He was terrible in his fake Chicago that was not representative whatsoever of that city. Like fucking finally, like my city gets in a game and they just completely fuck it up. But then the sequel to have such a character focus, and the third one goes, well, I tried to do that through systems. I guess Rob, like what was this like? What were you allowed to do? Like what was the setup for like you interacting with the systems of what was like the objective that you were after?
You had a ton of objectives to choose from. You could like work your district missions to like liberate the district that you're in. The demo took place mostly in Southwark. And then you had recruitment missions where you'd find like special high value recruits who you couldn't just, unlike the civvies on the street where you'd be like, hey, you want to join DedSec? These people require a little more coaxing, but they would also bring special abilities. So like, for instance, there was a spy lady that I could recruit, but I had to go recruit her and do a mission for her. It was dumb as hell. It was like, walk up to this lady and you got a sassy AI companion. So you don't have characters. You just have, what's the fucking dude in Portal 2? The little robot.
GLaDOS?
No, the little guy.
The Stephen Merchant character.
But it's something Lee.
Wheatley.
Yeah, there it is. Wheatley.
Yeah.
Wheatley.
So you basically got Wheatley.
Oh, that's an
Wheatley
AI guy? I thought that was a human.
No, Wheatley was a robot.
No. In Watch Dogs.
It's a robot. It's a robot.
It's an AI.
Interesting.
You can tell because when it talks, it's a glowing hologram that like shakes and flexes when it talks, like it's a mouth,
Like it's
Like a Siri.
I gotcha.
like it's breathing. So it's very sassy, and it gives you it's basically your main character, right? Is your character sort of asks it questions and then it sort of remarks upon what you're doing, and it's like, well, this spy seems like she's got a bit of a gambling problem. We could probably leverage that to recruit her. So it makes no sense. You go up to her and say, hey, you want to join DedSec? And she's like, nah, man. I'm like super in debt with gambling money. But you should talk to my friend who's been like trying to help me out with this. So then you drive to point
That's
B.
very forward.
Her friend, we haven't even gotten there.
Oh boy.
Her friend is like, yeah, she does have a gambling problem. It's crazy. It just kind of came out of nowhere. Oh no, she's trying to pay off her bookie right now, and she's probably being held hostage by them. And I was like, literally, I left this woman 20 seconds ago. It took me I drove around the corner to this friend, and I'm like, okay, I better go rescue her from her bookie, Clan Kelly. And
See, I thought the whole idea was that like you would scan like using the DedSec tech or whatever. It's like you would learn, like using the invasive technology, you would learn something about them that led you to like identify they had a gambling problem. Not that you walk up to an NPC and like, hey, what's your issue? It's like, I got a gambling problem.
Right. Right, like the clip I just sent you was like, oh, there's a woman walking through a bar and she's using her phone and reading. Oh, this person led a pro-union walkout, and that means that she's good at helping people, gaining support with people. Oh, this person is he's a CEO of a popular line of armored clothing, and so he has plus 30% damage resistance while in cover. Sure. That's cool. Fuck it. So is that stuff just gone in
No, it's still there. Like you can recruit. So yes, you have the similar like you can scan everyone and see what they're all about, but it's these special these unique characters, not unique because they're replaceable, but like these higher value characters that you have to do like a little fetch quest for. So I had to go to this like loading dock where she was being held hostage, lead her out of the loading dock because it's just like a little red area. It's like, oh, this is high security loading dock. And if you walk outside of it, she's been saved. So we did that. And then she was like, oh, you fucked it up. I was going undercover with Clan Kelly. I didn't really have a gambling problem. Anyway, I'll help you. And so now I had an agent. Also,
that's thin, let's say. Even by my standards of not needing much to start generating my own narrative stuff, that's a little... Like, again, I'm the person who... You've seen me play XCOM 2. You know how I feel about State of Decay. State of Decay gives you, like, 3 bullet points and 2 abilities, and I'm like, let me tell you about their lives. Let me tell you about what happened to them in 3rd grade. So I know I'm capable of making a system like this work, but what ends up being the problem is when they try to fill in the gaps too much. And what they fill in those gaps with is flat and doesn't justify what it sounds like. Because then you're going to send that person to go die for you, right? This person who didn't
probably get in the hospital or a prison.
Okay, well, that's all.
Yeah. So
wait, did they get rid of the permadeath stuff? Because it used to be.
It sounds like people can still die, but there's also a good chance they will end up in the hospital, GTA style, or they will end up in jail, and then you can like they are basically on cooldown until they're released. Or you can like recruit a lawyer to help like bail people out. Okay. Speaking of flatness though, let's talk real quick about the premise. Yeah. Which is that DedSec was framed for a like Guy Fawkes type attack. But like literally the opening of this demo is you find people trying to blow up Parliament, and they're trying to frame DedSec because they put DedSec literature by each one of their bombs. So like there's bombs all over Parliament.
This will fucking get them.
You get in a big gun battle in the House of Commons.
Yeah. God.
You stop the bombing of Parliament, but oh no, there's tons of bombs all over the city.
Is very. I don't know if you're familiar with that bit of fake trying to blame something on someone else. The Blacks rule graffiti. Anyway.
So you foil the Parliament bombing, but wait, it was a trick. They just needed to lure a DedSec agent out into the open so they could kill them, and then all these other bombs would go. DedSec would be framed, and that's how the authoritarian regime like cements its control of the city.
Gotcha.
But skip forward, they're so unpopular that people just love DedSec. Oh my God, we miss DedSec. DedSec was so good. Oh, we hate these paramilitaries. We all hate them.
Wait, then what's the problem? If people are already like down, let's go.
Yeah, so all of London is like, oh, if only DedSec were here, this would be better. We could stop these guys. And so that's why you can just go up to people and be like, yo, I'm with DedSec. Okay. And people are like, awesome, how can I help? So it is a like pervasive surveillance state where everybody is on your side. And there's no sense of threat or vulnerability at all.
Isn't that what a cop would say? Like, I'm with DedSec.
Yeah, this would be the easiest way to arrest.
Okay. So, to set up my district liberation mission, I had to go meet an informant.
Ooh.
And here's where we meet. Here's what she's saying.
I'm excited.
Oh, hi, are you with, how do I put this?
Great. Good.
And then basically you just have a whole conversation where it's like, oh, it's cool. I'm with DedSec. And then your informant is like, so I was doing a little hacking and I discovered where they've got all the surveillance capitalism. She found it.
Just, I have my morning coffee, doing a little hacking, as one does.
Oh, also this like punk getup she's wearing with the spiked hair and everything.
Yeah.
Like this game's aesthetic is very much like, man, Britpunk was awesome, and I'll bet those people would still be there in the near future, and they'd be on the cutting edge of like taking the man down. And so like all the people on the street you meet who are like, yeah, fuck the police, they're all like, they look like they just stumbled out of a Billy Idol concert through a time machine. Like it's a very dated view of like, here's the counterculture.
Right. Well, they'll be happy to know that Thatcher died. So congrats to them, I guess.
So yeah, you just go up to people and they're like, ooh, I better be, I don't want to get caught. This is really dangerous for me. Are you with DedSec perchance? And you're like, yes, I am not a cop. I am with DedSec.
Here's my DedSec badge.
Well, and we know that, we don't know this, but here's my bet. I've played video games before. I've read stories. 2/3 through this game, it's going to be revealed that 1/5 of your agents have secretly been undercover spies,
and it'll be randomized.
You know what I mean? You got to do that bit, and that'll be how they like. Oh man, we got to really be more careful going forward. And I bet nothing actually changes. Yeah. It's all hypothetical, but that is the vibe I'm getting from what you're telling me.
So
it's my called shot.
The other thing is, man, how do you break the control of this chokehold this surveillance regime has
that no one just like, again, just to paint me the picture of this place, it sounds like from what you're saying, the people love DedSec, or at least a huge amount of people do. They're ready to fight. They're still able to like go to the bar. They're still able to like go to their jobs. They're still able to like do like, they're not living under, they're not like under curfew, or are they under curfew?
London's still sweet as hell. Like, I mean, it's like a big mall.
They're what I'm really getting at is their freedoms have not been restricted such that they couldn't organize or.
Well, when I say cops are literally beating, the PMCs who have occupied the city.
Not cops.
Not cops. They're just beating the shit out of people. Like, you walk down the street, like anywhere, and there's probably a cop like giving a truncheon to somebody just for like looking at them wrong. And so
they are police then, is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much, except they're doing it to the white people.
Oh, okay. Different.
So like people in suits are getting clubbed. It's clearly tyranny.
But this is the thing, is if that was happening, this is why no one wants to, this is why white people in suits don't want to abolish the police, because the police work for them.
Yes.
Because the police don't do that to the white guys in suits. That's why they like the cops. So then why are they in charge still?
Because of the false flag attack.
That no one believes or cares about.
But the government still does. They still have power. But
we're the government. Get them out. Protest in the streets now.
There's only DedSec can handle this problem. There's clear, like, probably elections are suspended. Who knows? Okay. But the people need to know that resistance is not futile. Resistance can, like, they don't know their own strength. DedSec must teach the people their
which I'm here for. Honestly, I'm here for. There's part of me that's like, this is going to be.
Austin, hold on. Before you say you're here for it, let's discuss the praxis of DedSec.
Thank you for cutting me off.
So, you have to awaken the sleeping giant that is the people of London.
So far, so good.
Okay, so you got to do things like sabotage some like surveillance infrastructure, take out some of their sites. You also though have to like subvert their powerful propaganda machine. So you have to go to like these giant, like there's one quest where you have to go to a giant poster that they got projected on the side of a building, advertising the Albion Security Force, who are those like not cops, those bad police who are beating people up. But like if you could just do something to show that Albion, its strength has limits and resistance is real, you can awaken the people. So you can paint over the sign and you take this sign that says the world's finest for England, showing a bunch of militarized cops, and you can change it to "you are not illegal," and then like spray paint gas masks over those cops and put
Got
a
'em.
DedSec logo on it.
Right.
This is like the equivalent of like going to a Best Buy with a universal remote and just turning off all the TVs and being like, "Ha! I've solved capitalism."
Yeah, exactly. The note there that I'll say is like that initial poster has like a good line in it, which is, and like I get what they're going for here. Underneath where it says Albion Private Security, it says signing bonuses and citizenship sponsorship for immigrant applicants, and the idea of like, oh, you could be a citizen, you just have to like be one of our secret police, is like, okay, yeah, let's go down that road. That's an interesting the ways in which the marginalized are offered assimilation if you do the dirty work of Empire. I'm here for it. I don't know that if DedSec just spray painted "you are not illegal" over top, that would necessarily move the meter as much as they suspect.
Well, Austin, it moves the meter about
there's a
30%.
I see.
You get a defiance increased prompt when you do this because people see that sign and they're like, "Fuck, I'm not illegal."
So wait, what does it mean? What does it mean then to? Because this is part of like the general like sort of like open world infrastructure of that Ubisoft sort of established with the AAC games. What does it mean to liberate a district? Like what meaningfully changes in the post like, I mean, is it just like there's no surveillance? I mean, I'm just like, how is that reflected materially in the game? Did you see any of that?
I didn't see any
Less
evidence that
beatings
things
in
were
the
different.
streets. No, okay.
I
Right,
had,
like, do they wall it off? Is it something like they try to do in Seattle, where it's like, hey, we just put up barriers and like, hey, no allegiance or whatever
We got
those
the chop.
not cops are called? Yeah, like I'm just curious, like how the game squares this idea that mechanically it wants you to liberate different districts, but in a surveillance state, like how would that even be? There's enough hashtag resistance in this area to
Are you in the previous Watch Dogs games? It was like, oh, you've shut down their network here, or
Right.
you've gotten your back door in place so that you can, if they say, oh, someone's here, you can very easily flip the switch and they're not there anymore, or they're whatever. But this thing seems like it's more about the population's willingness to push back, and outside of like, no, we run this zone, this is ours. It feels like that's not really what would be happening. I don't know.
Right, like if the people suddenly decided we're going to beat the shit out of the cops, the impression would be that, well, the government's just going to ransack that particular area, and it is no longer liberated.
Well, and you can do that game. That's a game that you could do the game that's like, we're going to barricade in this zone, and every now and then you're going to get a message that says our zone is under attack. Can you come help us? Like that's a game that's like 3 different games that came out in the PS2 era that use those sorts of like zone control takeover. San Andreas did that. You know what I mean? It's possible to do that sort of stuff. And not the barricading part, but the zone control that gets contested and blah blah blah. The fact that you didn't come back saying, oh, and then you build the chop, then you create an autonomous zone.
No,
means
it's just
that
all
it
done.
seems like it's kind of flat. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you do the quests to increase defiance to critical mass, that's when I had that conversation with the informant I shared with you. So somebody shows up and is like, here's how we take down their big central base for this district. In this case, it was to blow up, it looked like the Shard skyscraper, but it was full of like surveillance servers. And you go in there and you blow it up. And then people are dancing in the streets and being like, yeah, DedSec, down with Albion. And then you're sort of kicked back out to the world, and it doesn't feel different. Like nothing, I kind of looked around, it didn't look like much was different. And I just kind of went on to the next missions, or the next map markers. And this was the really frustrating thing, dude, is like, there's no, like, at no point was there any sense of threat or vulnerability in this world. Like, you weren't, I felt more in peril being Aiden Pierce back in Watch Dogs 1. Like, the city was a slightly more hostile place. This one, you are basically completely at liberty. And the surveillance stuff is only there to help you, but it's all there to help you in really familiar ways. So instead of climbing to an Overwatch point, you just point your phone at cameras that overlook the bases that you need to raid. And you tag guys in the base and bounce from camera, get a full view. You can, like, the thing you do with your hacking powers, like that I did more than anything else, was to stealthily take out guards by hacking like transformer panels to blow up as the guards walked by them.
Oh yeah, I mean that stuff to me is like that's Watch Dogs. That stuff has been in both previous Watch Dogs. That's you have to buy that central conceit, otherwise their fantasy world just doesn't work.
But there's so little to it. Like, I mean, does it always have to be an electrical panel? Like, couldn't there be something else going on?
Sometimes it's like there's a water hose or a gas main. What else happens? A robot
You can paint
car.
a tunnel on the side of a building.
Yeah, they just run right into it. Like bonk, totally. Well, like the thing for me is, I think that stuff in Watch Dogs 2, especially, where that game had such a playful attitude. It wasn't an unserious game in many moments, but you're a bunch of young like DIY hacker punks in that game that actually feel connected to the youth culture of when that game came out in a way that was shocking and surprising. It felt like that game vibes in like an 80s teen action comedy way where like, yeah, check this shit out. I'm gonna, it's like blowing up the transformer next to the guy and zapping him is had the same energy as tying his shoelaces together. And that was the attitude of that game. But in a game what it sounds like is in a game where they're going for a much darker premise. Watch Dogs 2 premise was like, hey, what if Facebook too much? What if Facebook too much? And they were right. To be clear, that game is about Facebook trying to like throw the elections their way and gain more control over privacy. That game is
Watch
sick.
Dogs 2. Should listen.
This is what I'm fucking saying. You should play Watch Dogs 2. You should play Watch Dogs 2 just for the
Watch
weird.
Dogs 2 warned us.
Watch Dogs 2 knew ahead of time. Plus that one character has a cool mask. Anyway, but when the whole premise is so much more like, nah, dog, they won. It's bad. We're in dystopia land all the way. Flying drones, like everyone's information is completely. There are beatings in the streets. Then maybe it does feel a little more cartoonish out of place.
It's so weird because Austin, I can't really like the premise is super dark. The premise is like everywhere is being watched. Like the rule of law has basically been suspended by
and
this.
Aesthetically,
like, really,
it's playing in that space. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I keep saying thematically, but really, what I actually might mean more is aesthetically. It's black and red. It's the sort of like the neon that's supposed to be this means you're oppressed neon, and not the neon that means this is a cool party neon. Like that's the vibe of this game from what I've seen.
Yeah. But then when it comes to like you doing anything, everything is all affirmation. There's no like at no point did I ever feel like I am in danger. Like people are in, like it just was kind of, it reminded me of the thing about the Ubisoft model is really aggressive about always making sure that like whatever you do is fucking awesome. Like there is no task however trivial that an Ubisoft game will not immediately run up and high five you and be like, damn, you killed the shit out of those like 3 randos who were like no threat whatsoever. That's awesome. We've never seen anyone who's that badass. You're incredible. Please lead us. And I think like Watch Dogs Legion feels like we're leading this like David versus Goliath insurgency, but you're just the guards are people you can just tie their shoes together. And it never had any sort of vibe. It just felt like really familiar Ubisoft stuff without any sort of okay, so here's this game needed some more Ghost Recon Breakpoint in it. Cause like Breakpoint has a lot of the same Ubi shit. But like it would also at least sometimes try to really pursue you aggressively and make you feel hunted and make you feel like, okay, the world is hostile. This feels like maybe the least hostile world of any Ubisoft game I've played in a while. And maybe they haven't fully built that up, right? Like maybe the systems that like make the city reactive and aggressive and able to overpower you, maybe some of that stuff isn't fully there. Like I was just driving out of cordons, no problem. Like there was no meaningful pursuit. But this game badly needs that, right? Because I think to your point, Austin, one of the things that is implied by like you can recruit endless soldiers is that this fight you're in will require endless soldiers. That this is going to be like where one agent's quest ends in a hail of like gunfire, the next agent takes it up.
Right, that is like the demo that they first showed when they first debuted this game was a character who was trying to get something done, gets caught, gets shot down, and then you get a choice, which is let yourself be arrested or sent to the hospital, or stand up, risk permadeath, and try to finish your mission. And the thing that the dream version of this game is, there would be circumstances where you would want to get up and risk permadeath because you're compelled to, because of what the situation is, because of how important that mission is, and because you believe that someone else will pick up that work, even if you lose this agent or whatever. But what you're describing does not really feel like that to me so much.
No, and like
I'm still curious, obviously, but
yeah, I hope that it's just a kind of shallow, easy demo of like, here's what the general systems are, and maybe it can be woven together a little more effectively. Maybe there's like a hard mode where like the security stuff is way more aggressive and like there's less margin for error. Because yeah, I think for me, like if there were an identity here that appeals, and Austin, I think you and I tend to be on the same page. That sort of paranoid techno espionage like vibe is our shit. That whole like,
yes.
I don't know who to trust. I don't know when I'm being watched.
And I'm even here for, like, it doesn't need to be the conversation. Like,
no.
I would love for the conversation game to exist. It wouldn't be a open world third-person shooter. But I am probably even more here for this game in my blood than this is probably more like my breakpoint in some ways, right? Which is like it's hitting certain notes for me because my taste has been built this way over the last few decades. But that and the proc gen stuff, I'm interested in that stuff, but at the same time, I don't know that the thing I want is like the Antifa Super Soldier game to drain away all of the. There's a reason why we want an Antifa Super Soldier, and it's because it's kind of like a fun fantasy. It's kind of like, oh, well, we know this isn't how this works. We know that what it takes is like on the ground organization and lots of people being hit with batons and, suffering through tear gas and working against police who are working with white supremacists. And there is not like the super agent to come forward and save the day. And on one hand, this game seems like it wants to take a step in that direction because of the no clear single protagonist thing. But at the same time, if the gameplay design is such that at all points you feel enabled to do super heroic shit, then it's not actually finishing the sentence. It's ended at this comma splice. And instead of going, and change means pushing up against depression and suffering, and that having cost, it ends a sentence by saying, and also if you get the spy gets a super cloak, and with the super cloak, don't worry, you'll never get arrested or whatever. And that ends up that feels like it deflates the fantasy a little bit for me. It feels like it deflates what draws me to the game. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm still very curious about it.
Yeah.
I'm still curious if it actually comes out this year. Which is like what?
Where would it fit? If you're just trying to think
about
is it possible that we do this podcast and then we find out, oh, actually this game is coming out in August,
right?
And it's like really close.
That seems like where it would need to be almost, or next year.
Yeah, but it would be if they're going to do it next year. I feel like they would have just let AC. Like the fact that they let Rob play it makes me think this game is like
closer
more or
than
less
further
done, and that it's coming out fairly soon in a summer that Rob and I just did like a meeting, like going over like we should talk about who has to review stuff, and it's like, well, actually there's just not that much. Like August is pretty clear. August and September historically have been months where people have put in a lot of interesting stuff, but I think next gen, COVID, there's a lot of reasons why things are going to be quiet after like a July where they're like Paper Mario. There'll be like there's a decent amount of stuff for the next week or two, but then there's just not going to be a ton until like October, November, where things really ramp up. And so I could see Watch Dogs sliding into like a late August, early September, which would be a nice spot for it, where it wouldn't have as much pressure to perform. It could be more just maybe Ubisoft views Watch Dogs at this point as like an interesting curiosity franchise where it doesn't need to have the same weight because AC is out here and Far Cry really are out here because Far Cry is also going to get revealed. When does that game come out? That game's probably next year.
That's 2021. That has to be winter of 2021, right?
Or like next spring, like their March game.
Yeah.
Something like that.
The last thing I want to say about this game is I spent a few weeks ago, it was probably a month ago maybe, I think, when I was like, hey, what's happened to Watch Dogs? Are they doing anything with Watch Dogs? And I went down the rabbit hole of looking at all of the promotional material for that game. And it's so telling, maybe this is mostly telling about me, which is possible, that when you watch their world premiere trailers, their like play as anyone demo, their gameplay walkthrough, they have this entire series that's like the Classroom 101 video series. Everything is super aggressive, weird, punk. Like, not even punk. Punk's the wrong word. Like jackass, like again, prankstery.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, remember the grandma. That was like the
grandma was totally
the marketing.
And all of that stuff a year later feels bad. It feels bad to look at. Like it's the attitude just rings hollow. Everything feels false. Everything feels both too big for its britches and also too limited.
Well, it seems like if the game isn't going to lean into as much of the cartoony stuff as, even though the premise of this third one maybe betrays the ability to do that, if in Rob's experience, like, well, the actual like moment to moment of this game is not anywhere near the marketing material. It just creates a really weird tone piece for like what it's like the game's ideological leanings are, and then how it's being like. I'll be curious to see what, like, we're recording this before we know, but I'll be so curious to see what is the tone of the trailer. Like,
and we might not even talk about that this episode. That might be a thing we end up holding until the Friday episode this week because we already have Ghost of Tsushima. So we'll see. The video that worked for me is there's a video on the Ubisoft account, a YouTube account called Watch Dogs Legion, first gameplay details and play as anyone explained. That is like a talking heads video. Not the bad. That would be sick, actually. But don't do that to the Talking Heads, please. Where it's like, it's Clint Hocking and Liz England and Kent Hudson and I think maybe one or two other people from that studio. Be like, here's what the mechanics are. Here is just, let me just talk to you as someone who's devoted the last couple of years of my life to build this game. Let me talk to you about what I think makes this game interesting, how these systems work, what's intriguing about them. And when I watched that video, and I end up thinking about this game more like, what if Ubisoft made a State of Decay? What if Ubisoft made a zombie? I mean, Ubisoft did make Zombie U, but that scale of, what if we don't think about the Watch Dogs Legion as a big AAA, powerhouse blockbuster game, even though that's clearly what Ubisoft would like it to be. And when I think about it more as like, what if you got these like gameplay designers who all wanted to do weird proc gen shit together and just made them make a game? I end up being a little softer on it when that's the presentation. And that's what makes me so curious about how they're going to present it at this event that already happened by the time you listen to this. Because if it's more of, especially right now, if they lean into the tone that they were leaning into when this game first debuted, that's a real roll of the dice. It's a real roll of the dice if you can make your game about standing up to fascism and oppression right now feel legitimate. Whereas if you made the game that's like, oh yeah, we wanted to fuck around with proc gen systems, and also you can beat the shit out of authoritarians, there's something more genuine about it where it's like, yeah, we made the version of this we felt kind of comfortable with, but
there was some marketing material we were given where it included a message from, I think, Clint Hocking, describing what the game is and hitting some talking points. And I'm not saying it was not bombastic. It was very restrained, very measured. But like, one of the things that's made one of the points that's made in those talking points is Clint says, Watch Dogs Legion is about ordinary people coming together to make the world a better place. And I think that's very resonant right now. And hey, sure, leave it there. Yeah, but also even that might be a little too much, because it's just, I think there's actually two dimensions in which Watch Dogs is, it feels like it struggles a little bit. One is that the widespread unrest we are seeing has literalized a lot of the dynamics that Ubisoft has been playing on for years.
Yeah.
and really made them feel a lot less fun, and also really exposed sort of the hollowness of Ubisoft's treatment of them. Like, now we see these things in practice in the real world, and Ubisoft's history of depicting these things as like, well, most cops are good. Oh, like paramilitaries in the streets killing looters. That's probably legit. We want those guys out there doing that. Love to have like a state-sanctioned 3%er. So that's one dimension in which this is struggling. But I think the other thing is that maybe it's just because we work at Motherboard now, but like I think even in the general awareness, people now know the degree to which we live in a surveilled state and how like pervasive it is and how like all-seeing the government's eyes are. And I think one other aspect in which like Watch Dogs as a series is maybe a little unfortunate is that their fantasy, I think, is going to read as really dated. Even now, because it's like, oh man, what if there were cameras everywhere that like, could see what you're up to? And it's like, man, I'm more afraid of my phone than I'm like afraid of CCTV cameras.
Well, now that's the DLC, isn't it?
It's because you'd be on that phone.
It's because you'd be on that phone.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Is just this notion of it all feels very tame. And it all feels like 4 years ago, this is like, man, it'd be fucked up if the world was like this. And like, well, the world isn't just like that, but it's actually significantly darker in ways we can all perceive. And Watch Dogs Legion is still like, this can be a fun sandbox.
Right.
Like, this can be chill. Let's hang out and overthrow some authoritarians.
Right.
And it's a tough moment for that sort of like light treatment.
Right. We'll see. I almost had the date that was on my screen from watching an old trailer just now, which was March of this year. Can you fucking imagine? Can you imagine if this game had come out in March?
That would have been great, actually, right? You just sort of slide in. It would have been like sliding into home plate, where it's like, people are like, is COVID going to be bad? I don't know. Probably not. Time to ignore it. And like, you play Watch Dogs and like, man, what if cops were bad?
All of the bad tweets about how Kojima predicted COVID would be just about Clint Hawking predicting the protests. It would be bad. Those are bad tweets, just by the way, and just in case people want to make them. Those aren't good tweets. Want to be clear.
Well, now that we're in the tweet shaming portion of the show, we probably want to wrap it.
Yeah, it's probably about as far as we can take this
Otherwise,
one.
we can talk about the Harper's letter.
Nope, we're good.
You want to talk about Woj saying "fuck you" to Senator Hawley? We can do that instead. Nope, we're not. Nope, stop.
Wow.
Stop. That's just a tease.
That's just a tease for what's out there in the world. God, I got an email just now called "Keeping Joy Alive" from someone here at the Vice Media industry company. So maybe we should just close up. I can't.
From that subject line, I knew who it was.
That's how it goes sometimes. I hope everyone has a good week. We'll be back later this week to talk about some additional stuff. I hope everyone enjoyed the ridiculously long Last of Us spoiler cast that came out over the last few days, I believe is the plan, which is very funny to me. And
Fascinating.
We'll be back on Friday with more.
How
probably
could it happen?
talk
You
about.
guys suck.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not. Well, I like a long podcast too. Listen, we went long today. This happens. We'll be back on Friday to talk probably about that Ubisoft event and probably some additional things. So stay tuned for that. I hope that everyone has a safe week as things continue to try to open up across this country. Please stay safe. As always, thank you to Bowen for letting us use the track "Miss You" off the EP Pale Machine. Find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOEN. Where can people find you on the internet? Kato, who was very quiet this segment.
At _Kato_Pierce. I don't
Patrick.
play AC game. I mean, I played 1 and 2 and I hopped off. That was it.
That was the moment
That's
to get
the-
off.
Oh, Brotherhood was good. Brotherhood was really
Brotherhood
good.
was good.
But that's part of the extended 2 family, right? Like the whole Ezio arc.
Yeah,
The trilogy.
The Ezio arc is the trilogy. Yeah, Brotherhood and Revelations. Revelations is where I hopped off.
Yeah, same.
That's not true. I played 3, but I didn't play Revelations. Like that's too much for me. That's too many things in a row. Anyway, Patrick,
At Patrick Lubbock.
Rob.
What if Assassin's Creed, but too much?
Ubisoft's catalog for the last decade. And you can find me at Austin_Walker. Follow everything we do, twitter.com/waypoint, waypoint.vice.com. I don't have anything else. It's hot. I got to turn this air conditioner back on. I'm melting here. It's raining and it's so humid in my room that it feels like it's raining in my room. So
Amazon has delayed its upcoming MMO New World to 2021. God, Amazon, what a fucking company.
We didn't even talk about. I played Crucible. Was that what that game was called? Crucible.
Yeah.
For like
the
a
game
I played
that they unreleased.
They unreleased that game. That game needed to be unreleased and worked on some more. Good luck to them. That game was not where it needed to be. We're going to end this podcast before more news hits.
Did no justice to Arthur Miller.
What was that?
What? Nothing.
Fuck off. Fuck off. Fuck off. Go to hell, Rob. Also, fuck off to capitalism. And go home. All right.
Oh, I'm very punchy. Apologies.
Yeah. No, that's fine. What am I even gonna? I'm just gonna name this today's date because that's when I recorded it.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
It's 3:27 technically. That's the episode.
All right.
Okay, that's fine.
Hey, can we
so.
pause for can we pause for a second? When I tried to put in my other AirPod, it like tried to sync it with my laptop and stop my recording.
Yes.
Because my other AirPod was flying. So we're gonna do another time sync because my recording just stopped.
Yep. Sounds
Great.
good.
You know,
I don't know
who
why
else
that
has to
AirPod
make
decided
sure
it
they
wanted to
sync?
go to the what? Oh, Jesus Christ! Jesus Christ!
Unbelievable.
Patrick is desynced. What can I say?
So I'm gonna export this,
Sounds
or
good.
I'll just start a new recording.
We should just keep going on ours though, Kato, right?
Yeah, just clap again. It'll be fine.
Yep.
Did anyone ever read the Old Guard comic? I always
didn't.
have
I'm
come
curious
close to
about it.
buying it. I've had that in my hand like 5 times.
It's
Greg Rucka, right?
I think that's right. As soon as I saw it, as soon as I saw the Netflix thing, I was like, oh, I wonder if Rob is an Old Guard person. Mostly because I know that you're an Order person, and there's some overlap there.
Yeah.
And it made me think, I wonder if this is a Rob thing.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, let's
All
go
right,
to
we got
time.
time, that is.
Dot is
Slash
25
just.
seconds.
25.
All right,
Quick snap.
That
Yeah,
was really good.
that's how
That's the
you- that's
fastest
how you-
turnaround we've done it.
that's pretty good. That's how we push this defense back on its back heels. You know, they're not ready for that quick snap. Hurry up,
like,
offense.
Foles is going to do for us this
God.
fall.
Stop it. Don't even we can't do this.
We cannot go down this road.
See, the
Good luck,
problem,
though.
actually, the problem we made with Mitch is we gave him too much
Oh my
time to
God.
think. We just need a faster tempo offense. Like, go on one, count like 1,000 and pass.
Unbelievable. All right.
We just play
one
500. What was that game? What was that game where you just throw it in the air and then? Anyway, sorry.
It's fine.
We're back. Back
We're
at
back.
it again.
Yeah, I'm kind of dazed. All right.
Whoa.
Yes.
Oh my god. Your camera is like a full
What's wrong with it?
4
Should I kill
seconds
it?
behind
Hello.
your voice. It's
Okay.
wild.
Yeah. All right. My internet, like I've got Comcast coming here this weekend because my internet is just totally fucked.
Oh shit, that sucks.
So, although actually, you know what? Let me try something real quick.
Oh, that's
gonna
always
cancel
a good sign.
Good
The
sign.
upload.
Let's try something real quick. Rob, that's just Rob's MO. Like put it on his gravestone. Let's just try something real quick.
I'm canceling an upload. That's all I'm doing. That's probably why the
Oh,
That would
thing
make
was
sense.
slow.
Yeah, that would make
Uh,
sense.
But the upload was taking way too long because my internet has been really shaky. So we will see if this works now. Maybe it will. Maybe
I
it
like
won't.
your haircut, Patrick.
I got it real short
You got it
because
real short.
I didn't want to go back and get another haircut. So
Yeah,
I was like,
I
just
feel you.
just
I get you.
fucking go for it.
Just get it all off of there.
I bought the nice, like, professional grade trimmers.
Yeah.
I finally was like, I am not going to a barber for a year.
Yeah,
That's just not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen.
So instead, I was like, I'll bring the barber to me, and I'm the barber.
Right. Yeah.
I have this. I will be the barber.
Yeah.
And it was, and Patrick will be proud. I did some research. I looked at a lot of different like men's like fashion sites and health sites about like what's the best trimmers, what do professionals like agree is the best. There's a lot of consensus, and the thing they all agree is that like these trimmers are kind of a lot if you don't know what you're doing, and like the like civilian models like give you a little more safety measures and like guards to keep you from making bad mistakes. But I'm confident that like that sort of inauthentic baby tier like hair trimming, that's not for me.
No, of course not.
I'm going to go to some YouTubes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to figure out how to be like a barber, and then I can use these barber trimmers
that you already bought.
Yeah.
Do you think they learned on those, or do you think they learned on something else and then?
I think they learned on them. I'm confident.
I see.
That this is like you don't get bad habits from your trimmers. Like you might as well just like start using the real instrument.
Right. You can't learn guitar in a rock band guitar. You got to get a guitar.
I think this is more like not allowing yourself to use a bridge for a guitar.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
You know people can use those.
Yeah.
People who do this professionally sometimes use a bridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like important that you don't need to.
Right.
I think.
Right. At that point, why get clippers at all? Why not just get scissors and just really?
This is you know what? A straight razor.
Right.
Get a straight razor.
She get just a straight razor. Yeah. And just a bowl of hot water and a towel.
See, now you're talking.
And that
now
is
you're
it.
talking.
A bar of soap, maybe a luxury.
Damn, I need to send these back. I need to, excuse me, can you send this back with like a 4-inch straight razor and like a leather strop?
God.
Is Patrick fading in and out?
Yes.
Because his internet's shaky.
Patrick.
Oh, he had to go.
He said 1 sec. Fine, I will give you more time to watch you sack Berg Castle.
So there's not going to be a different Ubisoft segments recorded until...
Oh, right. I guess that's true, right?
Like, it's just this, because Monday is just going to be Ghosts.
And this.
Yeah, and then those two, yes. Monday will be...
Right.
All we're recording Monday is Ghosts.
Is Ghosts, right, correct.
You leave open the possibility
single
that,
Ghost.
If Ubi's going to introduce Far Cry 6 that weekend, so it might be worth just saying like, hey, as you saw, they're making a Latin American country great again. Yeah. It's funny because obviously we associate that with American right-wing nativist fascism, but what if it were in Cuba? Wouldn't that be bad?
It won't be in Cuba. It'll be in an island.
Yara.
Yeah. Is this
This is
confirmed?
actual, yeah. I mean, this is the screenshots that people were posting of the PlayStation. There was an English
store
version.
Stuff that leaked. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yara torn apart. Fight against Anton's troops in the largest Far Cry playground to date across jungles,
the largest
beaches,
one,
and Esperanza, the
finally
capital city of Yara.
Okay.
Guerrilla firepower, employ makeshift weapons, vehicles, and amigos. The new fangs for hire.
It's so funny.
To burn the tyrannical regime to the ground.
I'd love to deploy amigos.
I can't wait to
just
deploy
have my
amigos.
We're under heavy fire. I need amigo support ASAP.
Stat.
Wait,
Give me those amigos.
I said amigos, not migos.
Actually, if Migos was here, yeah, that would be ideal. God, where's Quavo?
Fucking.
Yeah, we'll fucking see. I have no expectations for that thing. Good, great, good. I had not seen Dia make that exact joke. Perfect.
It's very good.
Oh, perfect. That's them.
Oh, fuck.
Hey. Hey.
I can't wait until like the opening of the game is like you're part of a good Bay of Pigs operation, but it goes bad, and then you gotta like liberate.
Well, I mean, this is the bet, right? The bet here to make is whether or not the big villain this time is going to be a socialist dictator or a corrupt American crony, right? Like that is, it's going to go one of those two ways, or it won't. Maybe it'll go like super vague politics, clearly authoritarian, but no actual idea as to maybe it'll go the model. God, what was it? I guess it was the Far Cry 4 version of it was the one where it was like, well, he wants to bring sort of global authority to the place that you're at, but he's not just a pushover, but also we're not going to get into actually what his policy work is. We're just going to say he's kind of a baddie, but he's a baddie for no one likes him at all. He has no real allies. Maybe that's how they'll go with it, you know? Anyway, that game is definitely going to start with Bad and Bougie playing. This is my called shot.
Oh, fuck. Yeah. Or at the very least, the first amigo that you can recruit will have that like playing.
We'll have that
are.
playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's in the same way that Far Cry 3 opens on Paper Planes, even though Paper Planes had been out for years.
Right.
I feel like now Bad and Bougie is that version of that. The thing is, I know that we're a month out from outdoor seating happening, and it's just going to be torture every time I go outside because I know I'm not ready for it. I'm not ready for outdoor seating.
It hasn't happened in your...
Oh, is it happening near you? Because it hasn't happened near me yet. Not anywhere I walk anywhere. Ugh.
If you've ever been... I don't know if you've ever happened to be on Vanderbilt down here near the park.
Yeah.
The stretch that has all those restaurants, all of them
They're
have
all
blocked
open on
off
outsides.
the fucking parking lot, the parking spaces in front of their places with like outdoor seating.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I live near a couple places that traditionally have outdoor seating, and none of them have opened up that yet. So that's why I didn't realize that it hit other parts of the city as
I think that was part of like what they allowed in like phase 1 or whatever was
that makes
like
sense. Yeah.
distanced outdoor seating. And like
I'm just curious, though,
every
if,
place
like,
around here like did it.
I'm just curious to what degree this sticks, though. Like, we are reopening, but also, like, everywhere else in the country is getting bad. So, like, for how long does it not get worse here?
Yeah.
So that they have to shut things back down. Because that seems like the trajectory we're on.
It sure does. And I don't fucking know.
Still buzzing?
I still never caught up on Dark, which I know is like not horror; it's more
but
sci-fi.
Everyone loves it. I haven't watched it.
I loved the first season, and then there was such a long gap in between season 1 and season 2, like 2+ years. And they just put out season 3 and finished it.
I was gonna say it's the last one, right?
But I've heard you need like a fucking flow chart because without getting into specifics, like there's a reason you need a flow chart. There is some time shenanigans involved that forces you to explain how that works. It would be to explain like a great trick that is revealed early on, but I definitely highly recommend.
Can I get a recommendation? Can I get a show recommendation?
Just in general?
Just in general. No, I have like a specific request, and maybe this is more even of a Rob Zachney thing, so he's not here. But
sure.
Patrick, your expertise would actually, I think, is the space. I think maybe Matt and Cotta, you both maybe have some of this, some touchstones here. Here's what I'm looking for. You know, bad TV procedurals, like the Law and Order model.
Sure.
You know, bad TV procedurals that then add a little twist to it, and they go. My favorite is Almost Human, the one that's like, what if Law and Order but cyberpunk? What if, or they do like, there's a bunch of these. There's a subset of these that are supernatural or occult investigations. X-Files
literally called supernatural.
But also supernatural, grim, Sleepy Hollow. There's a bunch of these. I want the version of Sleepy Hollow. So Sleepy Hollow is the one that has like a time, the Ichabod Crane, I think, comes forward in
said
time.
that show was like genuine. It was like on Fox or whatever, right?
It was
like,
all right. It had some moments. It was fine.
It was like very much like this should be shit, and it was like, this is okay. This is pretty good junk food.
It was junk food. What I want is the version of it that takes place during the American Revolution era instead of the one that takes place during. I want trashy, or not even necessarily trashy, but like supernatural procedural mystery show. I want the X-Files, but it takes place in the 1700s.
Man, that'd be
or
really
something.
Good.
And I don't know why no one's made that. Or if they have, and I want to know I need that recommendation. I want the Dresden Files, but it's
there
Ripper Street. You know what I mean?
There was like a WGN show about witches, I think. That was something like that, I think.
Just Googling X-Files but olden times.
That's what I want. That's what I want. I want where you come into the town and there's a weird werewolf. I want The Witcher. Maybe what I want is The Witcher. Maybe I should just watch The Witcher. But I want
Witcher or
That's my girlfriend.
But I want
watches
more recent.
all of these, so I will ask her that question.
Yeah.
She will.
I want
she will
gothic
know.
horror. Do you know what I mean? I want
Yeah.
I want that, shitty, overrun cities, the plague. Like, I want that middle, like, post-Witcher, pre-cell phones. Pre-phones, actually. I want Deadwood, but Deadwood had a werewolf.
Yeah, like supernatural Renaissance,
Right.
procedural.
Anywhere in the early modern period, right? Like basically early modern to the beginning of modernity. Anywhere in that 400-year period. I'm putting that out in the world. Someone can
there's not a lot. It's weird. There's not a lot of historical.
Right.
Like, despite that being like such a
for,
really specific framework, there's just not much of that.
It's the 1950s, but the setup for Lovecraft Country is basically like it's a procedural, but told from the perspective of black characters.
Right.
In
Is that out?
the American 1950s?
No,
August,
August.
I think.
August.
Yeah.
That's
The book is really good.
I need to get to the book. I've heard the book is really good. So, all right. We should do a time.is. I should turn off this after this year.
this sci-fi.com article, 13 supernatural TV series that lovingly ripped off the X-Files. It's got all the, ones you would normally hear, Millennium, Warehouse 13, yada, yada. And then at the very bottom, they list X-Files season 8 to 9. The X-Files, but with new agents.
God.
That brief period when they both left. Oh, that's good. Hey, that underrated period of the X-Files, actually, because it was basically like a spin-off show, and some of the core writing of the stories actually got stronger in some ways.
That's interesting. Yeah. All
Anyway,
right.
time.is. Also, the new Unsolved Mysteries is pretty good. I watched
I've heard
the
it's
first
good.
episode.
I've heard
It's like actually centers like the it's like there's a couple of like supernaturally ones. I've only watched the first one, but the first one is like, no, it's just like here's a bunch of people dealing with the trauma of like losing someone and how much that would be horrible to not know what happened to them, and like centers the families in the storytelling. It's actually like surprisingly nuanced for the
Compared
show.
to-
And I fucking loved Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah,
as
me
a
too.
kid.
I was just telling someone like that was the show I was most scared of, but could never pull myself away
I got
from
to
as a
the end
kid.
of this first episode, which has no supernatural components whatsoever, and yet was like nervous when the music played. It was just like enough to like bring back all of the ghost stories that I used to watch late at night on that show.
Wild, yeah. All right, let's do a clap at let's do 4 seconds.
All right.
All right.
Ghost of Tsushima could be the name of an Unsolved Mysteries episode from
Ghost
the
of
90s.
Tsushima. Yeah.
Robert Stack could please
Yeah,
someone
with
get a
Rob-
Robert Stack
Oh
to
my
do.
God.
There's gonna be a Robert Stack imitator out there, R.I.P. Robert Stack. But come
yeah,
on, give me
rip to him.
do the setup for Ghost of Tsushima.
Please. A noble samurai. Just like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm here.
I just want Robert Stack, but reading IMDb setups.
Please.
That's,
we have to resurrect Robert Stack and get him a cameo. All right.